which one we sending?
But it did, in her case, we call her leader.
No, but she,
Senate.
right?
But I could call her minister of.
You would call her the minister of
Health.
Wellness.
So she started this morning.
Yeah, but then.
That my boss, she always did that at my laptop. You know, so it's sitting. She there, right? She's there, right?
No, she in the gallery. You want her?
You see that way?
Should we gather? Should we get in?
And then.
Sorry. Bless all men and women, boys and girls across our nation. Remember our fellow citizens who are currently overseas. Give us all perseverance to press through discouragement and gratitude to acknowledge you in any success. So, Lord God, what we know not, teach us. What we have not, give us. What we are not, make us. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.
This House in session. Before we commence our government business, I wish to welcome the 4th-form social studies students and teachers from the Springer Memorial School, organized by teachers Mr. Tristan Williams and Miss Khadija O'Farrell. I hope that all of you enjoy today's sitting and that you will learn, glean, and observe everything that goes on in this chamber. I wish you a good morning session in this honorable chamber. Minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, 9th June 2026 to be deferred. Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honor the Speaker. Messages from His Excellency the President. Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' business, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills. Medical problem.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the Barbados Medical Products Bill 2026.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day. I just want to clarify and elucidate on the Constitution Amendment 2025, specifically Section 53A(1) of that Act, and it speaks to attendance of ministers in either house. 53A(1). A minister who is a member of the House of Assembly and a minister who is a senator A may attend any sitting of the Senate or the House of Assembly respectively. Just want to clarify that so that people understand when the minister from the Senate is leading off debate this morning that she is doing it as prescribed by the Constitution of Barbados. I therefore invite the minister, the honourable senator, to take her place.
Order number 6, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness, to move the second reading of the Barbados Medical Products Bill 2026.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Before I begin, I want to do two things. One, to acknowledge the historic nature of today's debate, where a minister from the other place is presenting in this place. History has already been made in the other place, as on one other bill so far, we have had the minister for that bill presented in there, along with the Attorney General, who also has the right to present on any bill, not just matters coming from the Office of the Attorney General. But today, we return the structure to this honourable place, and we begin this particular debate on the Barbados Medical Products Regulatory Authority Bill. Secondly, I want also to acknowledge the significance of this particular piece of legislation that is here before this honourable chamber. It is a piece of legislation, Mr. Chairman, that perhaps brings me to my second point that I want to start with. I am going to apologize up front for inevitably reverting to the language of the Senate and saying Mr. President more than once. So I beg your forgiveness.
You should be guided not to so do.
So if I make that mistake, I beg your indulgence and forgiveness, but I will endeavour not to do so. Mr. Speaker, this bill is a landmark piece of legislation. There are around 72 pages of this legislation that I believe this honourable chamber and the public has had an opportunity to peruse. We have a long list of clauses all the way through 80 clauses and 3 schedules. And we have here, and I beg your indulgence to acknowledge the work of those who have helped to bring us here at the outset. We have here with us the former head of the Barbados Drug Service, Dr. Mariam Hines, who has piloted a significant body of work that has led us to this place. We also have Mr. Lindsay Bino, who is not here with us today. He was with us in the other place when we piloted the bill there. But together they have been tremendous, and I want to acknowledge their contribution to this landmark piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker. Now, as I get to the bill itself, The work that you have before us is done by the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, as she was at the time, Ms. Sean Bell, and I want to acknowledge her contribution as well to the development of this bill. But what is the bill, Mr. Speaker? What is the bill? What are we talking about today? What makes this a landmark piece of legislation? I know that every last person in this honourable chamber knows the experience and has had the experience of COVID. I know that we went through the process of dealing with COVID, navigating the challenges of accessing medical supplies, having countries have excess, hoarding those supplies, the use of export restrictions where we could not get those medicines or those supplies, from ventilators to vaccines to therapeutics, into this country because they were manufactured, produced, and stored in a jurisdiction outside of not just Barbados, but outside of our region. We went through that, Mr. President, not too long ago, and we remember it very well. And so this is the genesis of this body of work, which started with my predecessor, also from the other place, Senator Dr. the Most Honourable Jerome Walcott, who, as Minister of Health, along with our Honourable Prime Minister, pioneered that work, this work coming out of that period. So let's start there. That is what was the impetus for this body of work. So we know what happened in COVID, but let's fast forward to where we are now in 2026. On any given day, we're not sure what is happening with the global supply chain, whether it is food items, whether it is oil supplies, whether it is gasoline supplies, whether it's agricultural products, and in the case of this particular bill, if it is medical products, the global supply chain is prone to disruptions, with or without COVID. And we have a scenario where, with the Strait of Hormuz closed, we're seeing what that has had an impact on globally. In one country in Europe, we had a scenario where the headlines screamed at us that this particular country was 2 weeks away from being out of critical medical supplies. They are a manufacturer, however, so they are manufacturing domestically. They have a domestic supply capability. That is not necessarily the case for a country like Barbados or any of the countries in the region. So even if the global supply chain interruptions so created challenges for them, they're going to have difficulties with inputs into the manufacturing. They're going to have difficulties into the finishing products for their manufacturing sector. They're going to have difficulties with the assembly chains, which are supplied globally. But they still have the capacity to mitigate in ways that smaller jurisdictions like Barbados would not have. We hear all the time talk, Mr. Speaker, about the food import bill. In agriculture, we import this percentage of our food from outside. In the case of medical supplies and drugs, we import 47% of all that we consume in this country. That has created, in combination with the things that I've just raised, what happened during COVID, export restrictions, countries hoarding, as well as global supply chain disruptions, those things have collided to create what we describe as a perfect storm, but also a perfect opportunity, Mr. Speaker. And what is that opportunity? That opportunity is to introduce a series of entities and initiatives in this country to be able to ensure that Barbados is able to secure not just its energy sovereignty, not just its food sovereignty, not just its agricultural sovereignty, but also our health and medical products sovereignty. Having control over our own production and ensuring that we have a regulatory framework around it to make sure that Barbados never finds itself 100% at the behest of another country and their willingness to help, or, as we saw in COVID, not willing to help. And we can help ourselves, Mr. President. So that is where this legislation originated. What does the legislation set out to do? I'm going to speak about the legislation itself in the first instance, but I'm also going to speak about it in the broader context within which it sits. It starts out as a medical products authority. When this bill was first being drafted, it was thought that it would speak to medical products, or rather I should say to medicines alone. Following consultations with stakeholders, and there were extensive stakeholders, it was felt that this bill is not just about medicines. This is about medical products, which takes us back to what I said originally. Whether it's ventilators or whatever it is, it has to ensure that we are able to have that security of supply in country. But we're not just supplying for supply's sake. We're not just setting up a corner patty shop. This has to be done, and it has to be done well. So if we're setting up a domestic manufacturing industry, that is meant to be done in the first instance, Mr. Speaker, under an entity we now know as the Barbados Pharmaceutical Inc., BPI. BPI was born out of the development of a life sciences industry, which is happening in the Ministry of Industry, led by the Ministry of Industry and Innovation. And that life sciences work is evolving to bring life sciences, manufacturing, pharmaceutical companies to Barbados to establish domicile, nearshoring production here in country, as well as assembly, and providing a base for Barbados to evolve from just a logistics hub to a pharmaceutical hub to a distribution hub, and as I will come to in the course of my presentation, a regulatory hub for the region, not just for Barbados. And so BPI has been created. BPI is meant to be the pharmaceutical production entity. As I speak right now, Mr. Speaker, the team from BPI, they are in Nigeria with one of our primary partners that we have been collaborating with over the last 4 years, initially led by Senior Minister Walcott and now led by myself and the team at the Ministry of Health and Wellness. They're there on what is, I believe, their third mission to engage with pharmaceutical companies on the African continent. So far, they have engaged with Rwanda. You saw that happening with Prime Minister Motley and Senior Minister Walcott, led by President Kagame in Rwanda with the creation of a pharmaceutical hub in Kigali. That is where this originally started. So we've gone from Kigali, we've had the African Medical Services Platform coming out of COVID. That has been evolving. You have AMA, also out of Nigeria. You have had Addis Ababa and the Ethiopian government coming in, and the first African and Caribbean health ministers meeting taking place in Addis Ababa in the margins of the African Union Summit, where Prime Minister Motley and Senior Minister Walcott attended, and they began this process of creating the relationships that were born out of COVID that did not just affect Barbados, that did not just affect our region, but also affected equally countries on the African continent who equally could not get access to medical supplies. And so our countries, south to south, chose to collaborate. And out of that, all of these initiatives have been of the Barbados Living Lab. So we have the Barbados Pharmaceutical Inc. for manufacturing. We have the Barbados Living Lab for research and development. And now here we are with the Barbados Medical Products Regulatory Authority, because, Mr. Speaker, research and manufacturing must be regulated. It must have a framework around it. And if I were to put this in layman language, this really is the layman's equivalent of what in Barbadian terms you look at the back of any product that you have and it says US FDA approved, US Food and Drug Administration approved. If I were to break that down in very simple language, that's really what we're doing here in Barbados. Because in order to have a domestic manufacturing space, in order to collaborate with other countries in the way that we're doing now, there must be regulation around it. So this bill sets up the regulatory authority to be able to do that. This bill is driven very heavily by the regional frameworks, not just here in the Caribbean, but also in the African region, that have been driving pharmaceutical manufacturing and the regulatory authorities at the highest level. If I were to go through the bill itself, Mr. Speaker, Part 1, just the normal preliminary arrangements, and the establishment of the authority itself is then captured from Part 2 onwards. Part 2, clauses 6 through 20, will capture the way in which this is set up. But I want to park here for just a few moments in terms of the number of persons that will be coming from the public sector. It is intended, you know that the Barbados Drug Service exists already, Mr. Speaker. It is intended that the Barbados Drug Service and the Barbados Medical Products Regulatory Authority will be separated. One will have the regulatory oversight, and in the way that the drug service did have some regulatory role to play before, those officers are meant to be shifted over to the Barbados Medical Products Regulatory Authority, thereby separating and creating what you call the Chinese wall between procurement, production, and regulation. And so the regulatory capacity, now in its entirety, will sit only in the Barbados Regulatory Products Authority. Pharmacy premises, I know that at least one member in here is going to be very interested in this particular section, and it covers things like the registration of pharmacy, certificate of registration being displayed. Those are things which are already in place. They exist already, but it just captures it in here. Then you move on to the control of medical products, which speaks specifically in Part 5 about the licensing to manufacture medical products and so on. Now, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, you see I did it there just now. Mr. Speaker, in a social media post I saw yesterday, they were showing an example of a country in one jurisdiction where a young man was being invited to sell products in his pharmacy, in his shop, that he knew were counterfeit goods. And he chose not to do it because he wanted to protect the community. This is one of the things that this legislation is meant to do, to protect this community by way of regulation from counterfeiting drugs and drugs that are marketed to do one thing but really are not doing what they're said to do. And that goes on and is covered in Part 6 of the legislation, marketing, authorization, and registration of medical products. It also speaks about surveillance, because that's important. What is not monitored is not done. What is not enforced is not done. And so there's pharmacovigilance that is captured in Part 8, quality monitoring, and recall and withdrawal. This is an important part of this legislation, Mr. Speaker, because under Part 7, where it speaks about the recall and withdrawal and disposal of medical products, this is where the government apparatus will then coincide with each other. So from the Customs Department, from the Department of Commerce, from the Barbados Medical Products Regulatory Authority, and the broader apparatus of the Ministry of Health, this is where it is colliding in this section of the legislation, because they all have a role to play. From the time they land at the border, from the time they're cleared and import license is granted, until the time they hit the shelves, the regulatory oversight and surveillance is meant to be extensive. So the rest of the legislation speaks about the standard things like clinical trials and national quality laboratory control. Now, this is an important part of it, and the University of the West Indies is a critical stakeholder, because this gives us the opportunity to be able to work closely with the University of the West Indies on research and development, but also to ensure that there is a framework around the outputs of research. A few weeks ago, I was, Mr. Speaker, in Geneva attending the World Health Assembly, and while there, this particular issue was one of the things that we attempted to have meetings on. So there's the World Health Assembly, and so you have the core meetings, but we also took the opportunity to meet with all of the partners that we possibly could meet with on the various bodies of work underway in the Ministry of Health. And this was one of the things that we did. We took the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to have meetings with the World Health Organization, yes, but with the World Trade Organization that governs the trade in pharmaceutical products, the World Intellectual Property Organization that manages the intellectual property associated with research and development, including clinical trials, and of course how those things coincide with the work of the WHO. And we agreed that we would have a tripartite relationship between WIPO, the WTO, the WHO, and the Ministry of Health to be able to work on evolving this particular body of work on quality control, clinical trials, and the trade in medical products. One of the things that we also took the opportunity to do while there, Mr. President, was to meet with bilateral partners, whether it was Nigeria or Rwanda, colleagues based in Rwanda, we did that as well. Because this body of work is meant to get us to what is called maturity level 3 by 2028. And what do I mean when I say that? Maturity level 3, for the purposes of the World Health Organization, means that we are equivalent to many of the other developing countries in the world. And it is an ambitious target. It means that the kinds of partnerships that I have just described with WIPO, with the WTO, with the WHO are critical to our ability to accomplish what we have set out to do. So where I started, Mr. Speaker, was the supply chain. So we're working with the WTO and others on ensuring that we can figure out where Barbados needs to intersect in the supply chain. We're working with the World Health Organization and all the partners who have provided us with the support over the last 4 years. And equally, right here in the region, earlier this year in March, we had the opportunity to present on this work and other work to our region, because you can't just be everywhere out the road and you can't bring it home. And so in March of this year, we took the opportunity to present it to our CARICOM partners and to share with them that Barbados was well advanced in this body of work But as is Barbados' way, we are willing to collaborate because what you don't want for yourself, you don't want for nobody else. And so we want to make sure that the same countries that face the same problems that we did are able to benefit from the investments we have already made. And so at the level of COSOD, we started to work with our CARICOM partners on where we can collaborate with regional partners. And there are at least 2 or 3 countries that have expressed a willingness to work closely along with Barbados to be able to develop Barbados into a regional hub for regulatory development, but also to support the work of the Barbados Pharmaceutical Inc. There is some exciting stuff happening in places like Guyana, and while there we were able to see some of the incredible things that my colleague Frank, Minister Frank, is doing there in Guyana. Equally so in Jamaica. Minister Christopher Tufton is doing some incredible stuff there. And so one of the things that we have said, and I know that if we talk about supply chain management, this is a part of what must be said, Barbados is small. It's a small economy. And so it is important that we're able to collaborate and build scale and to build economies of scale, but also to come to a place once and for all where the supply chain challenges that I started talking about when I opened my comments, that we mitigate against those things as a collective. We could not have done what we did during COVID by ourselves. We were able to do it with the support of countries like India, of countries like Nigeria, of partners like the African Medical Services Platform. And so equally, we have to be able to build out this ecosystem because that's what this is about. This medical products regulatory authority sits within a broader ecosystem that will be dependent not just only on what we do here, because I think it's clear so far that this drumbeat is moving at a pace. But what we also want to be able to do, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that we can work collaboratively with our regional partners to build scale to protect our region from the vagaries of inevitable supply chain challenges that will come our way, that we push even further into South and Latin America to work with our hemispheric partners as well. And we also had really good meetings collaborating with our Canadian partners, with the Minister of Health of Canada, while we were there, about the possibility of building closer relationships with Canada as part of the development of this overall ecosystem. So, Mr. Speaker, this is the bill that is before this honourable chamber. This is a transformation and an ecosystem that is being presented to our country to benefit our people. One of the things that we also want to be able to do is to be able to drive costs, make sure that we can build economies of scale, attract investment, build capacity, and also create a new cadre of skills coming out of our tertiary level institutions to service a brand new industry. What an amazing thing it would be, Mr. Speaker, if young students coming out of the University of the West Indies in medical sciences, in natural sciences, in innovation, in computer sciences, can see themselves as being part of a brand new life sciences industry, creating products, researching, running clinical trials right here from Barbados to service the rest of the world, starting first, however, with the rest of the region and the rest of the hemisphere. This is the kind of aspirational work that has taken place so far, and we are incredibly proud in this Ministry of Health to be able to spawn new skills, new industries, new development, ultimately in pursuit of what we in the Ministry of Health call health sovereignty. And with these few words, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill is read a second time.
Honourable Member for Microsoft Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe that I am telling the truth when I tell you that I do not intend to be long in this very important debate. But I do think that this work is important as part of a body of transformational effort that the government is driving. So this medical products bill and its establishment of a medical products authority and the structure to be able to advance a pharmaceutical industry, but also to be able to regulate how Barbadians and others who consume medical products on the island and medical products generated here and medical products coming from other places, to make sure that there's also a protective regime. And I start here, sir, at the point of a protective regime because I really want to be able to situate this legislation within the lives of people every day. And forgive me if I start at the point of what I believe is one of the challenges that we always face. Some time ago, we had to confront this issue, a similar issue with the Ministry of Agriculture, and the question of pesticides. And what are the kinds of products and chemicals that we allow to come into our country, that we allow to enter our ecosystem, and that we therefore allow to enter our water supply, to enter our water table, to be able to get into, once you use a particular pesticide on a particular crop, once you use it in your yard or on your Christophine or on your spinach, it doesn't end there. And we had occasion as a government some time ago to bring new legislation that would also regulate and affect the kinds of pesticides that come from other jurisdictions that, first of all, have different topography. We have, with our limestone topography, sir, a kind of filtration system that means that anything that leaches from residential use, from commercial use, from industrial use can very easily get into the water supply. And we had to make a decision to say, look, yes, these things are used in other places are not Barbados. We have to protect our unique environmental system, and we had to make some decisions about how we would protect ourselves and our biodiversity and our water and our other environmental concerns. Equally, sir, I feel that I welcome this legislation, if only from the perspective of helping to regulate and helping to educate on what is appropriate to enter this jurisdiction as drugs, as medical products, as cosmetics, and so on. The minister who led this debate made reference to the United States Food and Drug Administration. And that entity in itself has some challenges of its own, because there is a narrative that the FDA in the US heavily regulates some things and barely regulates other things. And some of the things it barely regulates are perhaps some of the things that are potentially most harmful to individuals. But sir, we have a kind of a tradition, perhaps a griot tradition of talking about medicines and passing on certain things from generation to generation. There are things that we would say in the Bajan vernacular, certain things that unite with. When we talk about night with, we mean that you rub on yourself. We have a tradition, we have had, sir, medicines and products that have come into the normal usage of Barbadians that within months and years were banned in many other jurisdictions. And one day, you would go to find Benji's balsam or something on the shelf, and then you won't find it again. Because somebody would say, oh, no, they stopped selling that for that purpose. Or you would have another interesting encounter, which is that you would pick up a product and it would say for export only. And you would think, well, I beg your pardon. So you're trying to tell me that you're not going to use this for the purpose that you intended in the place that you make it, but you'll export it for us poor fools to consume it because it is banned in your jurisdiction, but you don't mind if it is used by other people in other jurisdictions. And so it is important, I think, that this legislation will now start a public conversation about how we consume medication, whether it is over the counter. There are some things, sir, that we know that we can get over the counter in Barbados. And I know the member for Christchurch West Central will have much to say about this, but there are certain things that you can get over the counter in Barbados that you could never find over the counter in other jurisdictions because of the level of regulation, and there's good reason for some of this. But sir, I also want to speak to another custom that we have that I imagine and I hope that this legislation frontally addresses, which is the habit of claiming certain healing benefits of certain things that nobody has been able to give evidence actually works. Sir, I go into Bridgetown and I pass a sign that says that here within this precincts of this business, we cure cancer, we cure this, we cure that. And you walk in there and you buy things that they claim can do all of these things. And time has come, sir, through this legislation that if you have not independently tested and verified that these items can do what you claim they can do, you cannot make that claim anywhere in advertising, by word of mouth, on the radio when the Saturday afternoon come, so that Barbadians who are lining up to have their medical issues addressed and who consider that they may be able to do it more economically, to go and buy a piece of bush in a bag for $20 than perhaps to have to go and get an appointment or wait for an appointment to have it properly addressed. You are taking full advantage of an entire population of people that, one, feel that they can do no better, two, are desperate for something to address their issue, and three, live within a culture of home remedies. It is a fact that we live in that culture. That we have a habit too sometimes of going to the pharmacist and not the doctor. Or of talking to the man that is working at the pharmacy that is not even the pharmacist. And asking, we all the selling here for this, and we all the selling here for that, sir. The habit, the practice by companies, and we know who they are, of going on the radio and going on the TV and claiming that they have products that cure all kinds of things, that is a regulatory issue. It is almost bordering, sir, on the level of criminal. Because if I am claiming and I am stopping somebody from seeking legitimate medical care because I am claiming that something that I am selling them can do something that I have not proven that it can do, then that is a gap in the legislation and in the regulatory regime that must be filled. And I am celebrating this legislation to the extent that it is going to be able to help regulate that particular issue. It is time well come for that to be addressed. And I hope that those that can hear my voice, that know that they are in breach of what I have just described, will not wait for the legislation to address it, but will fall back. And that their conscience, if it hasn't pricked them by now, will prick them as a result of this debate. And they will realize that they are taking advantage of Barbadians and will desist from the behavior. But so this legislation also helps to give a framework and create a platform for something else, for a positive execution of a new industrial policy, or part of a new industrial policy. And sir, I have said in this place and other places many times that industrial policy for small islands is always an interesting debate. There's a time in global economics where industrial policies were fully set aside for perhaps the last 2 decades. You know, there are trends in economics just like there are trends in everything else. There are times when there was a time when everybody had industrial policy and they were following it doggedly, and you had to make sure that you were creating export zones and doing all of these things. And then we realized, hang on, there was a risk. There's a risk of capital flight. We don't want to create these special zones, and then all of a sudden people come and benefit. They take their rents, they take their profits, and they run off. And that fell out of favor. And then people said, as a matter of fact, all right, let's not bother with industrial policy again. And then we realized that we needed to have a framework within which to transition to this fossil fuel free, or this green, or this climate friendly and climate smart lifestyle and livelihood and system. And we realized that it was not going to be easy to be able to move countries from basing their industry on fossil fuels to basing their industry on climate smart or climate positive investments. And then we all decided green industrial policy was the way to go, and here we all are coming up with new industrial policy again, especially for small and emerging economies. But I happen to believe that industrial policy for countries like ours is important. And the debate is, should we pick winners? Should we say, we're going to focus on these 2 or 3 sectors? Or should we create the regulatory environment in which most business can thrive? And I tend to believe that small nano economies like ours have to do a little bit of both. We have to be able to say, look, we're going to make the state a bit of an entrepreneur ourselves, right? And we're going to put some state support behind 1 or 2 sectors that we feel strongly about and that we have a particular interest in developing. And at the same time, we are going to fix all of the nuisances of the doing business environment. And I call them nuisances because I think the only way to face and fix something is to call it what it is. And we know that from opening a bank account to all kinds of other things, we still have work to do on the regulatory environment, and that is why we set up the Competitiveness Committee that is going to be able to do some of that work along with the Growth Council. But we do have to pick a couple winners, or what we think will be winners. And I think that for all of the reasons that the Honourable Minister who led the debate intimated, the pharmaceutical sector is an obvious sector for us to develop. It is an obvious win for us to strengthen our partnerships with other jurisdictions, with India, with Canada, with others, that will mean that we're able to get drugs, medications, pharmaceuticals at prices that will be sustainable for our population, that will be sustainable for our health sector. It is important that we strengthen those partnerships instead of looking to the traditional places that, quite frankly, have built up a healthcare sector on their side that is all about profit making, whether it is about how they provide healthcare or how they provide drugs. We, as a social democratic system, cannot easily coexist in a partnership with jurisdictions that do not prioritize wellness and healthcare, but prioritize capitalism and making money from healthcare. It is not a natural partnership. And so what is a more natural partnership is to find jurisdictions, find countries, Rwanda, India, and others, where we can have agreements that mean that we can find drugs at low cost for our population. The OECS has the OECS, Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, has for some time had bulk procurement of medication. And I've never understood why we were not able to be a part of that process, to make sure that we are able to, there are people that will tell you that the kinds of volumes in which Barbados wants to buy, well, that's a drop in the bucket. I will hardly write up an invoice for that. I have sat in meetings, and I know other ministers have, where people say, you want how many? You want 20,000 PPE? You want... No. That's a donation. We're not writing up an invoice for that. We're not entering that in our procurement system. Y'all are too small. And so being able to partner with other countries to say, let's procure together, has always been something that we needed to be able to advance. But apart from the countries with whom we partner to make these things more accessible, we also need to develop our own system. And the Barbados Living Lab, as a part of this overall structure that is presented through this legislation, is a part of that. It is to be able to say, look, we know that people of African descent, the majority of people in Barbados and the Caribbean, experience pathology, experience disease in different ways. We have this body mass index indicator. I quarrel with doctors about it all the time. I go into a doctor's office and they tell me, your BMI is such and such. This is a BMI of an overweight person. And I say, I want you to look at me and tell me if I look overweight. And I say to them, but don't answer that, the members in here don't answer that. But I say to them, surely you have read the research that says to you that women of African descent, people of African descent, in the composition of our bodies and the fact that we tend to carry more musculature and all of these things, it means that BMI is less applicable to us. There are so many other markers, there's so many other things that we experience differently, from fibroids, the incidence of fibroids in women from our part of the world. There's so many things that we experience differently. The symptomology for certain things is different in people, in our populations. And finally, here is a regime that says, look, we have to find some of the answers to our own problems, and we have to develop the medication, we have to develop the medical devices, we have to develop the wherewithal to see about ourselves. I got that one from my mother. My mother would always say, you got to get up and see about yourself. Nobody ain't going to come and see about you. You know why? They can't make money off of you, 280,000 people. They're not interested in our population. They're interested in the larger populations where they know that they can go and sell more to these people. And so if we don't see about ourselves through legislation like this, nobody is coming to save us. As the Honourable Minister said, we saw it during COVID. Nobody was coming to save us. And the leadership that the then Minister of Health, the now President of Barbados, the Prime Minister and others showed at that time was to be able to move first and move quickly and move on behalf of CARICOM and move on behalf of others and reach out to India and reach out to other jurisdictions and say, listen, they're not checking for us, come let me see about ourselves. To reach out to the continent of Africa, to be able to partner with that platform to say, this is how we will save our populations from this pandemic. This is the kind of legislation that means now that we have an industry and that we grow an industry, that we have technology transfer from the University of the West Indies, so that whatever is being developed there has a pathway now to be able to find its way into production, to be able not just to serve our populations, but to be able to sell to populations that look and live like we do, and to be able to create markets in those places. And guess what? The largest market of people that look and live like us is who? on the African continent. I had a meeting this morning with the regional director, the sub-regional director for the United Nations Population Fund, and we talked about the demographic bonus on the continent of Africa. We have a different demographic problem. We have underpopulation in our region. Guess what the continent of Africa has? The population pyramid looks completely different. The population that is 18 to 25 can't stop growing, booming. It is a clear market for us if we can develop an industry for pharmaceuticals, for people whose bodies behave like ours, that is a market for us. Arguably, there's also a market for us to be able to address the other population problem that we have. But this legislation is indicative of a new way of thinking, a new way of looking at how we grow industrial policy, how we take care of ourselves with our own resources, and how we align ourselves with like-minded partners that can help us grow this industry. Sir, the final point I wish to make with respect to this legislation has to do with the overall efforts of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and what I always like to refer to as the medical campus of St. Michael. And a member for Christchurch West knows that I will always come to this. Because not only are we seeing legislative expansion in this very forward-thinking, forward-looking legislation, but we're also seeing physical and infrastructure expansion. And we know that the services offered through our polyclinic primary care system and through our tertiary care institution at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, we know that there are improvements to be made and that the ministry is getting on with those improvements. Part of that has to do with the hospital expansion that is underway, and that will extend even further into the medical campus of St. Michael South Central. Because from Martindale's Road up into, across Edmore on the other side, up into Belleville, up into Colamarock, sir. And I know that I have solidarity through you, sir, because the Bannister land, Delamere land, Campaign land area, Martindale's Road, is part of the campus. And sir, I will always say that as long as I am representing people in this country, as long as I am representing St. Michael South Central, I will never wish to preside over an infrastructure expansion that does not bring people along. The people who live in St. Michael South Central feel a part of whatever are the medical or the investments in healthcare that are done at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. The people in Bannister and Delamere land and Campaign land and over into Carrington Village and into the city of Bridgetown are always able to tell me what is happening with the hospital. And I'm not just talking about the outskirts of the hospital, they're always able to say, this is what people are saying, this is how people feel about the service, this is how we feel that you could do better because we are here every day, we are selling fruit outside, we are orderlies inside, we are working in the laundry. The people who live and work opposite the hospital and in the hospital feel that they have some ownership in the success of the healthcare system in Barbados, you know. Let us understand that. And so as we develop opportunities for investment in this pharmaceutical industry, as we develop physical infrastructure and healthcare expansion, let us remember that there are people who are living in that medical campus who have ideas, who have productive capacity that can be used, whether it is in the physical building. I have, sir, these two young ladies always amaze me. And please allow me to call their name. I know that they will not mind. The Edme girls who live in Bannister land. One is a doctor and one is a nurse. Their grandmother came from St. Lucia. Their uncle is a national football player. This is the kind of family, this is the kind of story that these investments in healthcare are for and are about. They live right there, they could pile a rock and hit the hospital. And when I realized that this family was putting their all into getting these girls through medical school and through nursing training, I always keep it in the front of my mind as the example of what it means to people to make healthcare opportunities and health industry opportunities real in their lives. And so just as I expect that the hospital expansion across into the people's backyard and front yard will include them in the investment opportunities and in the employment opportunities, so having a Minister of Health in this honorable place might actually work out very well in making sure this message is heard. But also that this structure that is created through this medical products legislation will also create opportunities for them in investment, the kinds of work that we're seeing in domestic and regional pharmaceutical manufacturing, the kinds of work that will be involved in regulation and monitoring. This is also a piece of legislation, sir, that speaks to opportunity, not just regulation, but opportunity. And I know the people of St. Michael's South Central are happy to hear about that opportunity. And so, sir, I commend this bill to this honorable place. I feel that it is a piece of legislation whose time has come. I encourage the Ministry of Health and all of us to make it real in the execution, to be able to put the resources into the enforcement and the monitoring, to make sure that the protection that is inherent in this legislation, we actually give life to in protecting people in their maintenance of their health so that they can choose the lives they want to live and live full lives. And with that, sir, I'm obliged to you for the time.
Honourable Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first, let me say that this obviously, from the get-go, is a historic debate. Historic, of course, from the point of view of having a minister from the other place get an opportunity to come and present on a bill here in this honourable chamber. That in itself makes it an historic event, of which I am sure that as we see more and more of this happening, and of course when ministers from this place go to the other side, it will become par for the course. But to see the first person to be able to come and present from the other chamber into this chamber, that is definitely historic, and did an excellent presentation, as she does in the other chamber. So let me first make that point. The bill itself, Mr. Speaker, is itself historic. The bill itself, because this is an opportunity that hitherto did not exist in the massive way that I anticipate that this will happen, and this bill will give Barbados and Barbadians, or people from all over the world, opportunities. Now, don't get me wrong, Barbados has been making medicines before. Carlisle Laboratories, which was originally Collins, and they used to make cough mixtures and ointments and these kinds of things, and did a fantastic job. The same Collins that you see on Broad Street, you walk down here, they expanded and made Carlisle Laboratories, and it's now Aventa. And the Dika is one of their products that they use Histile and so on, and medications that are exported throughout the region and some parts of the world, and did an excellent job. You all may also remember, if you remember his past now, Eugene Melnick, who'd created BioVale. Eugene was a good friend of mine. And in fact, he had a place in Burt's Bar, which was part of the Senators hockey team. And in fact, he gave me a shirt with Dougie at the back, and I still have it. Historic Senators hockey team. He was also the owner of Senators. And Eugene created BioVale. And for those of you who know BioVale, headquartered in Barbados, we didn't really make anything in Barbados, but the company itself headquartered here, and all of the legislation that we've come under would have been headquartered here and through BioVale. BioVale, what it essentially did is it made medicines, same medicines, non-medicines, but increased their availability. So Wellbutrin, for argument's sake. Wellbutrin, by taking the BioVale, Wellbutrin got a sustained release so that it had an enhanced opportunity and made it more available in the body. And that's what he did, and that's what Eugene, that was the brainchild. Not that you're going to make a new medication, but you're going to alter how the medication is absorbed in the body and made available to have its efficacy and effect. Important. Now, I could have spoken on different levels on this bill. I could have spoken in terms of the enhancement from an industrial point of view. I could have spoken in terms of the advancement of the economic point of view. I'm going to speak a little bit about the technical point of view because I can speak on that as well. But we're going to see a wide range of opportunities here. But the interesting thing, Mr. Speaker, about this bill is about trust. Trust. And I think we've got to understand that. That's what these bills are about. This particular bill is about. This opportunity of trust. I trust that when a medicine is made in Barbados, that the medicine does what it says it is going to do. That the medicine has a certain percentage of an active ingredient in it, and it has other carrying capacities in it, and it will last for a certain period of time. I'll give you a great example. Expiry dates. Expiry dates is a big thing in drugs, in medication. And you have to understand, when you develop a drug, when you develop a medical device, you have to know what the expiry date of that is. How often have you heard of people who've taken a medication, but it was a long time expired, and what happened? It didn't have an effect, or it made them ill. Expiry dates is very important. And, and I'll give you an example. Endotracheal tubes. Nothing major. Medical device used to help people to breathe. They put a tube down your throat and they put gas in it and you can breathe while you're having an operation done. So it protects your airway. But that has an expiry date. And endotracheal tubes must be bought in certain stock levels because you have different types. You might go straight oral. You might go nasal. You might have the different gauges depending on the size of the person. But you have to buy all of them because you have to have them ready, because you can't have a person asleep and you can't protect their airway with endotracheal tube. But you know what happens when those expire? What do you got to do? Well, you got to dump them. Because it's not because the tube ain't going to work as a tube. It is because the sterilization aspect of it can only be guaranteed for that period of time that the expiry date exists. I'll give you another example. And Barbados could get into this tomorrow. Water for injection. Water for injection. Water for injection is just sterile water. And what we are saying is, because this is water that you can put in somebody's vein. So you got to know exactly what that is. You got to know that that doesn't have any impurities in it. You got to know that that don't have any bacteria in it. You got to know that that don't have any further consequences to the person. Intravenous drugs, dextrosaline, normal saline. All these are things that we can be doing. All those are things that we can be doing quickly. But it means having the regulatory facilities in place that people can trust that what they are buying is really what they are expecting, and nothing more and nothing less. And you have to do all sorts of formulations. I work a lot with local anesthetic. Local anesthetic comes in a carpool, 1.8 ml. But you know what? 1.8 ml, only 2% is lidocaine. The other 98% is water. And then on top of it, they got 1 in 80,000 adrenaline, or 1 in 100,000 adrenaline, or plain. And if you're going to make medication, you got to know, and somebody has to go out there and say, yes, I certify that this is exactly what you've labeled it to be. And that's what this is about. It's about developing a trust relationship. And I'm glad to hear that this is going to be expanded for the Caribbean. And that's exactly what we want. Because a lot of regulation, a lot of laboratory requirements, a lot of requirements in terms of what is necessary to be able to guarantee drugs and medications and medical devices is a lot for a small population of 270,000. But we forget the Caribbean is a population of 6 million, though. So if we can develop the same regulatory and use it like how we use CARICOM, where you have a regulatory hub, I heard the minister say it very clearly, a CARICOM regulatory hub, that then all the members of the Caribbean could join in and benefit from the regulations being developed here, and being given an opportunity to put that stamp of approval. Yes, this is exactly what he said it could be. And I want to get in also to what the member St. Michael South Central said when she spoke about pathologies affecting people of our race in one way, in different ways. But drugs also affect us in different ways too. And there's very little to no research on how drugs affect people, certain drugs affect people of African descent. And that's another point that we have to get into and have to understand. This is all important. And let me say, Mr. Speaker, from a regulatory point of view, well, let me get back to the one from an African descent point of view. I've worked, of course, in the UK and, of course, in Barbados. And in the UK, or in Barbados, sometimes you see a patient come who's from the Philippines. And they got wisdom to forget, oh, yeah, not easy, man, they're from the Philippines. Because I know that the Filipino bone tends to be softer, they tend to be of smaller stature, the bone isn't as thick, and it's relatively straightforward for me to do a wisdom tooth for that person. You ask a cane cutter from up in St. Philip who come down to get a wisdom tooth out, I got to get out the drill, I got to get out the chisel, the hammer, I got to cut that in 2 and 3 and 4 pieces. I work on it for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, because the makeup of our people is different. The quantum of bone that you have to work with is different. And we have to accept that. And in the same way that the quantum of bone is different, how we relate and how our bodies respond to medication is also different. And we have to accept and understand that more research has to be done. And I see clinical trials as part of this. And I think this whole legislation framework gives an opportunity to young people coming up from the UWI to say, yes, this gives me a chance to do something in my country, get it regulated, and get that stamp of approval in the country of my birth. Now, I want to be clear. This does not give license to the fellow who decide that he's going to Carter's and get 2 screws and put them in as dental implants. You know, you cannot go down to Carter's, and this is the whole point of this. You can't go and get something from down the road and say, right, this is a medical device. That's the whole point. You have to go through a regulatory process. You have to say, yes, prove its efficacy. Prove that it is going to do what you say it's going to do. And make sure that it is appropriate to go into the body without no side effects. Without unexpected side effects. And that's what it's all about. So, Mr. Speaker, this legislation is groundbreaking. It is historic. There's a part to it that I think that it didn't cover, but maybe it's covered somewhere else, and it has to do with patents. I guess that to have that in there may be too much, but patents and how we treat the patents is important. And why I thought of patents is when I was a young dental student, I had this great idea of how to make this thing to help people who were disabled, because I had a patient who couldn't hold the floss properly. So I said, give me an idea, man. Let me make an implement, it's not a toothbrush, but maybe make an implement that if you put the floss on it, and then some person who's disabled could go and floss the teeth without having to try to hold the tooth with the floss. You know, it's difficult even for able-bodied people. So I went to my professor and I said, man, you know, Professor Addy, this is a thing, Miss Bro. I said, it's very, very interesting, you know. I saw something like this somewhere, but you know, we have to go through the patent regulations. And I think what we should do is file a patent and so on. It only costs about £3,000. So let's file the patent, and we will think, but the university will own it because, you know, you're still a student at university and so on. I said, who? The university go, what? Own it? I said, yes, but you know, you file a patent and so on and so on. So I said, I didn't bother with it because £3,000, a struggling student like me at the time, you know, I had no £3,000 to, I had no £3,000 to pay in a patent.
I remember you said at that time.
At that time, a struggling student like me at that time. And I can tell you a story about struggling students and drugs too. And I didn't have that money to file a patent. You know, you and behold now, you could go and buy these flossers that look like a U with a thing on it. I didn't know if Professor Addy sell it to them, but I know that now the same idea that I came up with years ago is now available. If I had filed the patent, who knows, I might not be here now. I might be somewhere else with much more than £3,000. But, and I'll give you another thing about struggling students and trials. Also, when I was a student at the University of Wales, like all good students, you're out of money. So me and 2 other friends, they used to do trials at university. And they would give you the drug or give you a placebo, keep you in for a week, and see how your body responds. See how you respond positively, see how you respond negatively, and so on and so forth. And used to pay you good. You used to get about £1,000 or something for the weekend and things like that. They had different levels you could take. A friend of mine, another dental student, he decided, yeah, he going in. You don't know what you get. You don't know if you get any placebo, or you don't know if you get any real drug. Well, he obviously get the real drug. He went unconscious. They had to call in medical emergency. He had to be hospitalized. He was in for 2 months nearly. And he was a guy from, he was not a guy from Wales. He was a guy from south of India. And again, it shows, and it goes to the point, that people of different heritage may respond different to drugs. And it's important that we research these things and understand that, because this also covers clinical trials. I understand that clinical trials is not only clinical trials on animals, and that's another part to it that you got to be aware. Because then you start to do animal trial testing, all of a sudden the animal rights people come in and get involved. I remember another part of my university when they were doing animal trials, that the animal rights people bombed that section of the lab. And there's a real and serious thing. You got to understand that when you're doing trials, that you have to be aware that there are effects and consequences to doing clinical trials. And clinical trials don't only extend on locals or models, it can extend into humans or also into animals. And clinical trials is part of this. And it's important to understand that. Mr. Speaker, this is great legislation. This is the beginning, the dawn of opportunities to open up Barbados, to get things that we could do quickly, intravenous fluids. Where are we importing intravenous fluids? We could have intravenous fluids made right here in Barbados. Just get sterile water, the bag, and add it, get it tested, and move it forward. Water for injection. Little things like that, but critical and important, that could be the beginnings of a new and bright industry. And let's get real. Barbados is a highly educated population. We've spent millions and millions in educating our population. And if we have that highly educated population at high cost, because we're not a cheap destination, or not a cheap place, our rates of pay and wages in Barbados are high. So therefore, we can't get into industries in the same way that China does or other countries do, making shirts or whatever. We have to get into high-value industries. And medical devices and drugs and medications are one of those high-value industries that Barbados has to look at. And this is exactly the step that we need to take to be able to get opportunities for our people, give our people new ways and new ideas, and to support innovative and out-of-the-box thinking. To support our people, support that young man in St. Matthias that has an idea about a medication, that has an idea about a drug, that thinks that he can get a drug or make a drug better, or make a medical device better. I think of Lens Tech, and for years how they've been making medical devices and lenses across Barbados. Why is it that we're not doing other medical devices? There are others out there, and give our people opportunities. I support this legislation. Fantastic. And I look forward to see it in practice. I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, it is with tremendous pleasure that I join this debate. I want to begin also by lending my own voice of congratulation to the Honourable Senator who has made history today, piloting this bill on a visit from the other place. And equally, Mr. Speaker, as I said to my colleagues here, to my right and immediately behind me, it is one of the good things, sir, to be able to listen to the honourable member who just took his seat when he is in full flight in an area where he spent all of his professional life. And perhaps, sir, that accounts for what probably is now going to go down in history as the very best speech he has given in this House of Assembly. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, the truth of the matter is that we are at a very important juncture in national development. And perhaps it is a useful thing that there are about 30-odd students who are here with us today, because the question may well be asked, what is the politics in this? And the politics in this, sir, is that this is a very transformational piece of legislation that will chart a course for job opportunities for our young people, a course that we certainly did not have when we were their age at school. Mr. Speaker, sir, it helps us to go another step down the road of diversification of the Barbados economy. It takes us, Mr. Speaker, sir, in a direction which is absolutely fundamental with respect to broadening the scope of opportunity for those who have already finished courses of study in science-related fields in this country. And I believe that the statistic is that there are about 5,000 graduates of the University of the West Indies sciences faculty, natural sciences faculty, every 5 years or so. And those, for the most part, sir, those 5,000 odd students will find a career either not in the natural sciences, or alternatively, even though that's where they've studied, or alternatively, sir, they will be doing something like teaching. And there's nothing wrong with teaching, mind you, but they do not have a breadth of opportunity similar to that breadth of opportunity that exists for students in the same field of endeavor and the same field of study in other parts of the world. And so therefore, by this piece of legislation, we are opening doors to those people who have a scientific inclination at an early age of life. And there are many. I sat shoulder to shoulder with my friend who just took his seat when we were at Harrison College, sir. And I knew then, as he did then, that he was destined for a career in medicine, and I was destined for one in law. And indeed, for that matter, the Honourable Member for St. Peter was going to have one somewhere in the financial sector. Whether it be economics or accounting, that was to be determined. But you kind of know from an early stage what you, in many cases, where you wish to go and what you want to be. And it creates, therefore, an opportunity for our young people. Now, Mr. Speaker, there is another side to this. On Friday gone, the world was taught a very important lesson. When the United States, our friends in Washington, D.C., determined that the export controls will be placed on artificial intelligence at a certain level, so that foreign nationals would not have easy access or any access to that. Fundamental tool of development for many economies, if not all economies across the world, is artificial intelligence. But they're determined in their wisdom that they would ensure that foreign nationals, and that means all that we down here so, would not have equality of opportunity alongside those from the United States of America. We don't have to go back far in history. We know that this year there are those who live in Cuba who do not have equality of opportunity because it was determined by somebody elsewhere. Perhaps they say in Washington, D.C., memory fails me on some of these things sometimes, sir. But it's determined by somebody elsewhere that your access to something fundamental like gasoline and diesel is not going to be allowed because of your country's or your government's political posture. And so therefore a whole society is brought to a standstill. Human beings are crippled, brought to their knees economically. Economy starts to collapse because a determination is made about your well-being from somewhere else. And sir, you heard the honorable member of the other place when she started this morning and reminded us that it was in COVID that we wanted ventilators. And again, it may be correct to say that somewhere out there in the world, possibly in our neighbor to the north, a view was that the ventilators that Barbadians needed was not to come this way, and that even our national hero, Rihanna, who offered to facilitate but could not get them out of the United States of America, was in a circumstance where the offer was made, but due to the politics of that country, that which we needed for our survival could not get here. So it tells us a very clear story about the need to chart our own path. It tells those who are in class, in Form 4, in secondary school, whichever secondary school of Barbados it may be, that their destiny really lies in their hands, and that our destiny as a country must lie in our hands, and that pieces of legislation, therefore, like this, become an empowering impulse, an opportunity for us to look after and to protect ourselves, or this generation of Barbadians and generations of Barbadians to come. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a good day that we are here to be able to do this. Now, sir, much has been said about the fill and finish work that had been done by Carlisle Laboratories. I think that's what they call it, fill and finish medication. And there's obviously a history. Carlisle Laboratories may have gone back about 100 years, and they have been doing these small prescriptions throughout the course of that period of time. We are now at a point where we are supporting pharmacological development and life sciences investment and building out a certain element of supply chain resilience for Barbados and laying the foundation for a national pharmaceutical industry. I want to go back to the issue of building out our supply chain resilience. I gave you a few examples, sir, whether it be the oil and gas example in Cuba, whether it be the ventilators example that we've experienced ourselves. Mr. Speaker, sir, there are several. Countries like ours, which are import dependent, countries like ours which have economies that need in large measure to import things and do not have large manufacturing bases, will always be subject to some degree of fragility. There is a duty on the part of this government. There has been a duty on the part of all previous governments of Barbados to do exactly what we are doing today, and that is to build out for our people a greater degree of independence economically by ensuring that that which we call a supply chain How do we ensure that our people benefit from the things they need to benefit from if we do not manufacture them ourselves? And our failure has been, or our weakness has been, not necessarily failure, but our weakness has been, that because we do not have the manufacturing capacity, because we did not lay the foundation for that manufacturing capacity, then we were at a disadvantage as compared to other economies. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, in a real sense, this is part of the transformation and the diversification of the Barbados economy about which I speak. Now, sir, it is vitally important that I link this to another broad theme. I have said on the floor of this House many times, and I believe that either myself or my friend in the Senate, who is the Minister of Industry, will bring to this House, one of the two of us have to do it, a piece of legislation which will shape the future of Barbados with regard to a thing called standards. We have, sir, to be a standards-driven economy. And again, sir, all that this bill is, much that this bill is speaking to is the question of standards in the pharmacological sector, standards of manufacture, standards of medical device operation, standards, sir, of the quality of drugs we use in this country, because those things are imperative. And you just heard, sir, an excellent contribution come from the Honourable Member for Christchurch West on the question of the impact that certain things can have on the average human being. None of us are the same, and so therefore the standard has to be certain. As he put it, the drug got to be safe, and the people who are the consumer, it is about the consumer in the end. Those of us who are, all of us at some point are going to consume a medical product. We need to know that that which we are going to consume as a medical device or a medical product is safe and that we can place a certain degree of reliability on it. And that raises another interesting question. Why is it that it has been so easy for us to accept the view that if it import from outer America, it is good. If it import from outer India, it is good. If it import from outer England, it is good. But many will say to you, sir, that it ain't so good if it comes from the Caribbean. And that is part of the cultural shift that must now take place, where we see ourselves in a different light. And I read a very interesting article the other day. And I can make it very simple for you, sir, because the article really was an appealing article written by a Barbadian, whose name I will not now mention. But she drew the analogy of our love for Exeter corned beef as opposed to Grace corned beef. You know Grace is a Jamaican product. It comes from Bohea, comes from the Caribbean. But you know, sir, the statistics show that Grace remains on the supermarket shelf long, but that the Exeter and Hereford, sir, disappear quickly. And a large amount of it is that there's a view that the British is better and that the Jamaican one is good. And there's no basis for that, because the truth of the matter is all the corned beef come out of Brazil anyhow, whether it's the British made or Jamaican made. But there is a view that we have in this part of the world, that unless we import it from one of them big up places, it is as though because they have larger buildings than we do, and larger highways than we do, they have larger brains than we do. And that does not follow logically, Mr. Speaker. So part of this must also now be the cultural shift, because we are putting ourselves in a position to develop pharmaceutical products for our society to be able to utilize without us having to spend vital foreign exchange in importing them. And those products must now be at a standard that can stand shoulder to shoulder with any other product that we're importing into Barbados or importing into the region, because part of what we're doing is not only to look after the 270,000 people in Barbados, but to export. And again, this is another transformative thing, because it enables us to have, as an engine of the economy, earning foreign exchange for Barbados, the capacity to service not only the Caribbean, but Latin America as well. And I say to the Honourable Member for Christchurch West that he's 100% right. The discussions on intravenous bags has begun. And I believe, sir, we are at or about the contractual stage where the intravenous, the bags that carry the intravenous fluids will be manufactured in this neck of the woods. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the people who certainly I talked to when I was Minister of Foreign Trade, as recently as the latter part of last year, were signaling that their ambition is Latin America. Their ambition is to use from this place a launching pad to get their product across the Caribbean, and not 6 million English-speaking Caribbean people, but include Haiti in that too, so you're carrying it to 16 immediately, and the Dominican Republic, so you're carrying it up to 20-somebody million immediately, and then go further into Latin America, sir, so that you then have tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people. And that is really, sir, where we see this going. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, there's another aspect of this as well. And that is perhaps now, on a lighter note, the fact that there is a need for us, sir, to be satisfied that the products which we are using meet appropriate medical standards and quality and safety and efficiency of performance standards. Now, sir, I want to pause here, because I want to use this as a place to speak to fellow Barbadian men. And I think we have a weakness in this country that we must confront. I hear talk, Mr. Speaker, sir, that there are many of my, and when I say colleagues, I don't want to say colleagues in the sense of members of parliament, there are many men out there who, sir, believe that any product that appears on the shelf, once it has a blue color, is a useful product. And Mr. Speaker, sir, they will push down doors. They will buy out a shop or a pharmacy in quick order once you hear that there's a shipment on the island.
Honourable member, you know there's a pharmacist in here.
No, Mr. Speaker, I'm not speaking about anybody in here. Not anybody in here. Nobody. And Mr. Speaker, I say this now generally to Barbadians, because Barbadian men in particular, because again there is this, there has to be, and this is what this legislation is also designed to do, to protect our people in a very real man and woman on the streetway from the danger of false advertising, the danger of rushing to expose yourself to the inherent risk of a product that might not do the things it professes to do, or give you the treatment or the response that you want to get. But Mr. Speaker, you spend your good money on it, and then you spend a day, or should I say a night, of frustration because you were not able to achieve the end result that you hope to be able to achieve. And I choose my words very carefully, Mr. Speaker, sir, because there are far too many of us who find ourselves in circumstances where we know of somebody or have heard of somebody who has fallen victim. Now, I said we have heard of or know of somebody who has fallen victim, sir, to that type of advertising. It is as though, sir, for purposes outside of the election, for purposes outside of election season, the male in Barbados has fallen in love with the color blue. And that is, sir, a concern that we have to guard against. But Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality is that it is not only in that vein. There are several other products as well out there which purport to offer medical assistance of one type or another, that we must be in a position to protect our society against, and to ensure through legislation such as this that there are guardrails, that people cannot be scammed and disadvantaged and taken, sir, put in a position, sir, where they're financially fleeced because of the fact that they are seeking to buy a product that, sir, does not have or does not meet an appropriate standard or does not meet with an appropriate medical level of safeguard and certainty. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, above that, the question of the clinical trials was also addressed by the Honourable Member from Christchurch West. And, sir, we are talking about, again, positioning Barbados in the middle of what can be broader supply chain dynamics. You don't get to the stage where you have a drug certified at a certain standard unless you go through the clinical trial process. And to put us in the middle, sir, or to put us by legislation, we have now the capacity to be in the middle of product development. So that when my friend speaks about his experience in the University of Wales, it may well be that one day the University of Wales or some other university will be speaking with a large pharmaceutical company about a product which is of significant value to people in this part of the world, or indeed any part of the world. And for Barbados now, sir, by way of legislation, to be in a position where we can legitimately say, look, we can host clinical trials. And with hosting of clinical trials, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are going to comply with good clinical practice. We are going to comply with good laboratory practice. And in fact, sir, according to what the legislative ambition is, we can establish a national quality laboratory. It enables us, Mr. Speaker, sir, to go to that next level. That when these trials are being done all across Europe, all across North America and Canada, sir, and other parts of the world, that there are people and companies that benefit financially from being able to be included. But our lot has always been to be on the outside of the manufacturing process, either directly or indirectly, and therefore not to be able to benefit from the inclusivity that is being offered to them. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is also important to recognize that there are going to be those in our community, like the Honourable Member who is now leaving his seat, and I suspect the House, who has an academic interest in this area. And, Mr. Speaker, there will be others who will be able then to find a financial future in areas where we now come to the intersection between pharmaceutical development and studies and trials which are focusing on human safety. Trials, Mr. Speaker, sir, which are looking at the efficacy, is that the word? Efficacy of the proof, the collection of data. I ain't a doctor, but I do know that the data has to be collected, Mr. Speaker, sir, and having been collected, it has to be tested against a diverse range of considerations. It might be gender, it might be the age of people, Mr. Speaker, sir, different ethnicities, etc., etc. But all of these are stages where there are different levels at which Barbadian men and women of tomorrow will now be able to participate and earn a living. And that is the transformative aspect of this legislation, giving to the future opportunities that did not exist when we were coming along. And Mr. Speaker, it is for those reasons that I believe that this is the most valuable piece of legislation. As I said to you, it is a happy day for me to be part of a parliament that is doing this. It is yet another step that Barbados is being taken in by this government in terms of transforming the economy of the country, transforming the financial prospects of the country, and laying out a new sphere of opportunity for there to be jobs and upward social and upward economic mobility for the people that sent us here to represent their interests. I'm obliged, sir.
Honourable Member for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please permit me maybe a minute or two to offer condolences to the family of Mrs. Jan Linton, who passed last night. Ms. Jan Linton was the founder of Cancer Support Services. She has lent a lot to the population of Barbados for those suffering from cancer in many ways. She has supported the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Ward C12, she has an organization providing linens and so on. She even sponsored a room where patients who got radiotherapy for thyroid disease could be treated in. There are many families that would love me to say thank you to her in her passing for the aid they lent to them on their dying beds, oxygen supplied. I often stood up in Parliament advocating for more money for the organization, and I will continue to do so. She had an interesting holistic approach to the treatment of cancer patients, whether it be psychological, medical, seeing that they had the monies to do things, to buy drugs. She played a part in my education and several of the medical fraternity in terms of the same cancer treatment. Every year we had seminars to educate not only the medical fraternity, but patients and family members of those patients. And I hope and pray that her legacy lives on. She was a close personal friend of mine, as well as the rest of her family. And I want, if I may, on behalf of the House, to offer her daughter, son, grandchildren, extended family and friends, my deepest condolences. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'm excited, like the honourable member that spoke before me, maybe not as excited as him, of the prospect of medication that may no longer be blue, and I offer apologies to him for having the experience of taking some of the generic blue products and did not have the effect as he suggested that he thought. Not blue ones. They're now yellow and all kinds of colors. But since I started on that, I want to say a few things. The legislation is important. I wholly support it. But segueing from the previous member, I am happy to see that, and this is not the order I really wanted to speak, that there will be regulation in terms of the herbal medications, sexual enhancement medication, as he was trying to say but didn't. Things like fade creams. We had, when I was on the Pharmacy Council, we had several issues with entities bringing in fade creams, and fade creams could be very dangerous. People are not aware of it, but it could wreak havoc on the immunity. There are cases, I know for sure in Jamaica, where somebody died for constant use of fade cream, and then when they got sick, body could not defend itself. We had cases as a Pharmacy Council where you clear out an area one day, no backing from the police service. I don't know, the legislation said that we could. By the next day, the products or new set of products were back on the shelf. I am hoping that this authority now will have the teeth to see these things through, where people cannot, and they see it in the legislation, import things willy-nilly and put it on the shelf and market it to unsuspecting individuals. I think the legislation opens wider doors in terms, as everybody, other members said, in terms of investigation of drugs, especially herbal medication. I remember a time where on the western side, we used to produce, Guyana and so on, the region used to produce coconut oil. And America and those saw it fit to say that it was the worst product in the world, and the manufacturing decreased. Lo and behold, they took over the manufacturing. It's not the best product in the world, something that has started in the Caribbean. We need to look into things like that. We have things like the sour salt that everybody's purporting to know for treatment of everything. Sour salt, coconut oil, the several bushes, Cerci bush. There are members, I believe, in UE that have been researching this. Now is the time with this legislation that they can take it a little further in terms of research, in terms of clinical trials. I know that's a long process, but it's important for us, not only for financial income to the country, but basically putting Barbados is already on the map, but even a little further on the map. Everybody spoke about the clinical trials, and I agree, and it is true, that oftentimes this population, meaning the black population, are excluded. We had instances, I could think of at least one drug, where it worked both sides. Either it was proven this drug for hypertension worked better in the black population, or this drug for another reason worked in the opposite direction. And we need to have more research on our population, African, Afro-Caribbean, however you choose to call it. I remember as a young medical student, one of our pathology books, I think it was Kumar or something like that, stated, and if I look hard I can find it, black women do not
often have fibroids. Mr. Speaker, one in every probably 10 people that I see, not one, 9 in every 10 people have fibroids. And it was stated, and I remember, she's now Professor Patsy Prussia. Yeah, when I met her, she quarreled. She said, I don't know, these people come in this research for black people, everybody has fibroids in this part of the world, which is true. I hardly meet the patient. So things like that, we need to research, we need to look into. Menopause is now a catchphrase in Barbados. We need research on that. Women in Barbados, I find, tend not to want to have the hormonal therapy. Soursop is another thing that I hear through the grapevine that works. We have a lot of herbs here that probably will lend to things like that. And it's important that we as a people, as the population, delve into these areas. And I can remember here with these international trials, if many of you or some of you might know the drug metformin, popular drug for diabetes. Way back, Europe invented it, Europe started it. Going well in Europe, America said it's the worst thing in the world. No, America is using it as one of the top drugs for diabetes. The other thing is things like, I had a patient once that I gave, she lived overseas, but a contraceptive injection. We use it often here, not an issue. She went back home, could not get it, black person. The doctor said it would kill her, it would cause cancer, it would do this, but I had questions in terms of minority populations and what that meant for them, in terms of seeing that they do not produce more than they can handle in terms of children. So these are real things. Importation of drugs. At some point, I'm happy to see this, because it seems that at some point the importation of drugs there were individuals, I would say individuals on island, who were actually importing drugs, and we know we have the drug service, so they get them at a reduced cost, subsidized cost, and found a way to send these same drugs to other parts of the regions at a profit. I am sure this would hopefully, if it's implemented, will stop some of these things. We have well-known pharmacists that are responsible for this kind of thing, and I'm hoping to see a good crackdown on these things, including some of the drugs that the Honourable Member spoke about. He is perfectly correct, the member that spoke before me, in that there are a lot of over-the-counter, and the member for South Central, a lot of the over-the-counter supplements and medications that are around. I used to manage a pharmacy at one point, and Fridays, the druggist used to bring in a medication, I forget the name, a supplement. Every Friday we sold out.
Of course. We can.
Either it worked or it was a psychological thing every Friday, and there was little on the packaging. I saw a patient recently with an energy capsule, came in with palpitations, near heart attack, nothing written on it, but you see the products on it, and if you do not look it up, you will not know that these will cause these things. These are things this authority, I'm hoping, will regulate. I'm excited about that. The supply chain. We learned a lot through COVID with respect to supply, but it was happening even before then. We as private physicians and pharmacists oftentimes know, as I speak, it is happening where certain medications are out of stock because of lacking in the supply chain overseas. That and the public institutions, QEH, the polyclinics, are more or less given first dibs sometimes, and that applies to things like syringes and other medical equipment. Imagine if we could do some of these things ourselves, where we don't have to rely on an international entity in line to see after the big players got their supplies, where we come at the end of the totem pole, where we could actually be first on the list when we do it ourselves, where we can get quality drugs, that the Honourable Member who sits beside me were saying. Quality drugs. I remember a story where my father said he was in Canada at the time studying, and they toured saltfish production firm, and the question came up about exports. And they spoke about the countries, the larger countries that they export to, the quality salt fish, etc. And then he noticed a batch on the side that didn't look exactly too good. What do you do with this? And the guy said, we send it to countries in the Caribbean like Barbados, the third world countries. That is a reality, and that was what was happening, at least at that time. Yeah. If we can oversee our own production, our own quality controls, and the drug service, I will have to give them kudos. They were on it with respect to quality controls long ago. It's nothing new. If somebody reported that a drug was not up to scratch or they don't think the efficacy was there, the drug service got on it, researched it, tested it. So this is nothing new, and the public of Barbados, I don't want them to believe at the end of the day that the drugs that we have are not quality because there's oversight on the drugs that we actually have. I want to speak a little bit, it might be veering off a little bit because responsibilities might not be on the authority, but with respect to the drug service, I want to congratulate the staff on the work that we have been doing since, I can't remember when it started, 1980? 1980, right? I want to congratulate them. I want to also mention, and I will probably get a little lashes for this from the public, that I think it's time. Right now, the private service contributes to their drugs in terms of dispensing fee and so on. But we still have a big gap in the public sector, for instance, like polyclinics. And of course, I'm saying this with exceptions. There are many people who enter the polyclinic for medication. A lot of them returning nationals that get their pensions from overseas, never contributed to our system, never paid NAS in our system, but are happy to sit down with a book in the polyclinics for hours to get free medication that somebody else pays for. I think it is time, as I said with exception, that some of these individuals are required to contribute to the cost of drugs. It is only fair. And it can lend to less burden on it. And hundreds of people visit the polyclinic on a daily basis. It will lend to the burden of medication. The cost could go to some other part in medicine, something. But I think it is about time that we have a look at that or relook at it so that they will lend to the cost of it. We pay taxes, all of us in here pay taxes. Many people pay taxes, and I think it's time that others who come in from outside are asked to contribute a little bit. Drug service, I would like to see a little more input or from the private society. Yes, there is the university, what she called it? The honorable member for South Central.
The campus.
The campus, medical campus. But we have a lot of little faculties. We have a lot of little faculties on other parts of the island. So Philip is one. Like Blaisdell, yeah. Like Blaisdell. We have a lot of faculty. And we do have a lot to contribute in terms of choices of medication, and so on with respect to drug service. And we're all excited outside of the little off campuses. We're all excited about this legislation as far as I can tell. One of the things, it might be all over the place, but as I said, we need to do some studies on menopause and so on. So forgive me. Vaccines. I remember being on the Pharmacy Council, and I'm hoping it gets to this at some point, where the pharmacists, during COVID it came up, where the pharmacists were advocating for the authority to administer vaccines. The idea was to take the burden off of the doctors and the hospital and the clinics and everybody. Overseas, they do it.
Yes.
And I think this is one of the things that they have to think about and reconsider. When we speak about vaccines and supply chain and everything, have other entities. We are moving forward with nurse practitioners who are basically like doctors to a certain extent. Let us move forward to give more responsibility to our pharmacists. They are well-trained. Most of them are trained here. We know they're well-trained, and they're an important part of medicine, of the medical community. These are some of the things I am thinking of. I'm just looking a little bit. We have, and the honorable member for St. James Central spoke about the trials, and we have an educated population, and it is true. I have studied with several doctors who at the end of the course did not like the idea of sitting in front of patients, and they actually travel overseas and are part of research teams doing well. We need to get some of these people either back, or as he was saying, uptrain these people, uptrain university students. We now have a larger horizon for students to be able to study and give input to encourage people to actually stay on island and work. There's opportunity, as we can see out there, for this once it has happened. I'm not sure was the time frame for it, but we have that. So basically, there's something about disposal of medical products that came to my mind, which I thought was brilliant. And I want to interject here, it is a medical product, but not medical drug product. At some point, the hospital had issues with disposal of the byproducts from the labs, from what they do there. And it has always bothered me, because it's dangerous material, and it has always bothered me on where we would go in terms of disposal of that byproducts. I think bio-waste, that's the word I'm looking for. So I think it's still a problem. I don't know that it comes under this purview, but I will use this opportunity to advocate for it. Bio-waste, that's right. So basically, Mr. Speaker, I know I'm forgetting things. I'm trying to look through my notes. Basically, Mr. Speaker, I support the bill. No issues whatsoever. I think it will only lend to what we are doing in Barbados and the direction we hope to go in terms of looking after our population and indeed the region's population. So with that, thank you for your ear, and I will take my seat. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member St. James South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very happy to be able to join this discussion today on the Barbados Pharmaceutical Inc. I want to sincerely thank the Senator from the other place for being able to come and share with us and the country concerning the absolute importance of the development of this particular bill to allow us to move forward with the pharmaceutical industry for Barbados. And the reason why I am impassioned about it, Mr. Speaker, is because when I was assigned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, one of the things that presented a frustration to me was every time we did quoted and had to do exemptions for duties for different products to come into our countries, one of the areas that would keep repeating itself would be medicaments coming from Latin American countries, coming from other countries. And when I looked at the volume, the amount of money that was spent annually, the millions of dollars that was spent in bringing in products that I recognized that Barbados had the capacity to be able to produce, I said this is an area we must pursue. And that is why I am so pleased that we now have before us this particular bill. And in addition to that, not only is it going to be saving us money and generating money and so on, but this is part of a fulfillment for the diversification of the Barbadian economy to allow it to be more sustainable, more resilient, to allow us to be able to weather storms better, because we now have a diversity of different economic sectors on offer that keeps the economy strong, and more importantly for the young people sitting in the gallery, opportunities for interesting, good-paying jobs that they can get excited about and become a part of this pharmaceutical industry. And I'm trusting that you will be able to do so. So, sir, when we were approached as a ministry concerning the formation of this particular body, the Barbados Pharmaceutical Inc., to ask us to partner with them to be able to work on the area of providing the necessary training, the competencies, the skills to ensure that Barbadian people, young people, would be able to be a part of this industry and be a part of moving Barbados into a place of pharmaceutical security. My team was absolutely excited, and we look forward to continuously engaging the team and developing the plans to adjust what we are doing to ensure that we are in a position to give this necessary support. So that the discussion around the provision of a training academy that would support this particular venture, I think, is a wonderful and worthwhile one. Because I have always believed that Barbados is a place where we could go after pharmaceuticals and to be able to take advantage of the benefits which we offer in terms of the highly educated workforce or location, etc. All of those things make us a good candidate for pursuing this particular area. Now, in our discussions, there were a couple of things that struck me immediately. One was the target for how many young people they think they would need to start with. And so I was very pleased to hear, because what it meant was, of the thousands of young people who took science degrees at university, who took chemistry, who took biology, and then on leaving the university, not having a place in which now to express those skills in a creative environment, only to be allowed to go and teach science. Many of them had to leave our shores, Mr. Speaker, to find meaningful creative work in the science sector. At this moment, I'm thinking of a young woman who has her degree in chemistry, in biology, and she now is working with a firm in Canada working on materials innovation and looking at how you can develop new products from petroleum, a young Barbadian woman. We had no place for her within our setting to allow her to utilize her skills. And so for me, I am looking at where are the opportunities that we could offer her that she could come back and rejoin Barbados and help us to move forward in the area of science innovation and the development of products. This is going to be important. So I was very pleased in our discussions to hear that they have done a workforce role mapping framework that helps them to identify the range of skills that we're going to need to be able to support this industry and the types of requirements and competencies. This is going to help us in our collaboration to be able to identify the specific subjects that we must ensure becomes part of the University College of Barbados to ensure that our young people study the right combination of things that they can participate in the manufacturing of these products. So I am very happy and very pleased about this. But one of the wonderful things that was added to this that made me excited was you recognize that they were very serious about where they wanted to go, and they were here for the long haul. They spoke about the fact that digital training had to be an integral part of the science training to participate in this manufacturing opportunity. And therefore, it meant that they had already adjusted for the future, that they were bringing cutting-edge opportunities to Barbadians, that Barbadians who train with them and work with them will then have the world as their oyster and will be able to go any part of the world and to be able to offer their skills if they so desire. But we're hoping that we'll be able to keep them at home because we're able to offer them the type of job that gives them satisfaction, that gives them the sort of pay that they would like to have. So I truly, truly welcome this significant move forward in terms of the pharmaceutical industry. Now, another reason for my passion about this, and a number of members would have shared it, has been my concern for many, many years about the fact that a lot of medications that are developed were not designed for our African bodies. That whether you are African or Latin American, or if you are Caucasian or what have you, there are differences in how your body responds to medication. There's certain predispositions that different racial types have. Their genetic makeup make them vulnerable to certain types of diseases and to certain types of responses. And therefore, the absolute need for research for better health for our people is an important part of what we have to do. But we cannot sit and wait, as we have done over many, many centuries, waiting for somebody else to do it for us. Waiting for the colonial powers to recognize that we have a need and that they should, out of the kindness of their heart, make it a priority to look after our needs. What we are doing is getting up and taking charge of our own destiny and taking responsibility for our own future and doing this groundwork here to be able to ensure that we start this pharmaceutical industry and support it with the research that is going to be necessary, that we can begin to develop and design drugs and various products that work for our people. And at the same time, to be able to export this across Africa and Latin America and so on. A lot of people don't know that there are hundreds of millions of black people who live in Latin America, who came from Africa as we did. So, Mr. Speaker, I think it is important that we have that confidence in ourselves, that we have the skills to set up the necessary laboratories, that we have the intelligence to come up with some of the approaches that are going to be needed in order to come up with products that we can test and do our clinical trials and be able to offer to Barbadians and Caribbean people and African people and Latin American people products that will work for them. And the reason why I say so, that we have the capacity. I remember a mother called me about 3 years ago. She said, I want you to talk to my son. He's 15 years old. The child went to school at, I believe it was St. Leonard's School. He said he had invented a product. He had taken soursop and he had developed a product that you can use as an insect repellent on your skin. And he did his own little clinical trials with his product, and it worked. His science teacher had encouraged and supported him in the development of the product. But the challenge was where to go from here now. What to do with this now? How could he get to a commercial level? Who would take him seriously at 15 that he had developed something that they had tested and it had worked? And unfortunately, at that time, we did not have the infrastructure in Barbados at the time to really assist this young man to develop a patent on his product and to help him to take it to the next stage. So this is another reason for my excitement over the fact that we are forming this industry, taking it seriously, and pursuing it in all of its forms. And like the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, I am trusting that the management of the patents and so on will be a part of what we're doing, and that we will provide the necessary funding, because doing a patent is a serious thing. You can patent here, you don't patent everywhere. You find yourself in a problem. But if we are able to put the necessary monies and funding available to allow people to protect those patents, then Barbados has a very, very bright future. Not only because we could produce a young St. Leonard's student who could develop an insect repellent, but for all the other wonderful things that were shared by the Honourable Member for St. Philip North, which I myself am very, very keen on. Here in Barbados, we're not only talking about the soursop for cancer and the other uses that it has. You're also talking about things like bay leaf that is extremely good for asthma. But somebody needs to do the research, do the clinical trials, and identify what products we can get from out of it, and then we start the agro industry to be able to grow and to be able to use the lands, for example, that are being made available to us in Latin America. I believe it is Venezuela and one other country, Honourable Member for St. James Central. Guyana? Yes. That if we can identify a product that has medicinal values, those lands offer us the opportunity to commercially grow those particular items so that we could have a viable pharmaceutical industry in that particular product. That is what I am excited about. I think about what a lot of the old people call Wonder World. You young people wouldn't know a lot about that product, but that product is probably one of the best antibiotics that you can use if you have a cold, if you have an infection of any kind. Wonder World is something that has powerful medicinal properties, but the research has to be done. The testing has to be done. The investigations have to be done so that people effectively use it and not misuse it or overuse it and make themselves ill instead of better. And those are only 2 or 3. You have no idea how pleased I was visiting one of our medical universities to hear that they were doing significant research on some of the foliage around the country and were identifying solutions to problems that we have here in Barbados. They've made significant progress. I am hoping that they're reaching the stage where they can actually come out and say what that new product is and how we get it from a common plant grown in the gardens of Barbadians. This is exciting work. And sir, there is another wonderful, wonderful benefit coming from this. For centuries living in a colonial environment, the colonized live with a sense of inferiority. They live with a sense that they do not have the same worth as their colonizers, that they're not as bright as, that their observations are not as valuable, that they lack the ability to be as effective in the development of their economies because they're not bright. And this is something that has plagued generations of Barbadians and Caribbean people. It is built into our psyche. We don't understand how it affects us in terms of how we evaluate ourselves and value what is around us. And that is shown, Mr. Speaker, by the lack of interest that we see in our communities about a number of things. How many people have taken the time to check to see what climate cherries can do? Who has looked at the fact that we have shak trees all over this country and nobody has a clue as to what that seed is about and what it can do for anybody? Why? Because the inherent inferiority complex makes us undervalue what is around us, and we are more comfortable with what comes from elsewhere. And as long as that remains, you will always be dependent at an economic level. You will never chart your own destiny. To chart your own destiny, you have to believe in yourself, you have to value yourself, and you have to value what is around you. The development of this Barbados Pharmaceutical Inc. is an expression that Barbadians are breaking out from those inferiority complexes, are beginning to understand that they have value and worth, and that yes, they can step up to the plate and do something bold, do something different that previous generations have never done. And that is one of the reasons why I applaud it, because it will build the self-esteem of Barbadians when they recognize that we can bring something to the table that is of value and that has worth, and can be used by other people across the world, because we innovated, we created, we succeeded against the odds in working in this particular area. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, the other reason why I'm excited about this is how pharmaceuticals will tie into our agricultural industry. I'm excited by the fact that now that we have built the Hope Agricultural Training Institute, and now that we are finishing the Duke facility, that Barbados will now have the ability to be able to work alongside the pharmaceutical industry, alongside the agro-processing industry, and begin to grow and experiment with the types of plants and seeds, etc., that can be used in any of the things that we want to do, whether it is food supplies or whether it's pharmaceutical supplies, that we can work hand in hand in helping to produce the best varieties that will support your pharmaceutical industry or your agro-processing food industry. So the students at Hope and the personnel at Duke will be able to become part of this chain and work hand in hand to help Barbados succeed in the development of a pharmaceutical industry. And this is why I'm excited about it. I want to congratulate the Honourable Senator and her ministry. I want to congratulate the Ministry of Agriculture that will be a part of this. And the Ministry of Technological and Vocational Training is eagerly waiting to work as a firm and strong partner to help make this a living reality, to bring opportunity to our young people and to give them the hope for a bright, bright future. May God bless you all, and thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Christchurch, West Central.
Thank you for the delayed opportunity, Mr. Speaker, sir. Let me start by saying that I want to, again, wish my condolences to the family of our late Chief Fisheries Officer, Dr. Shelley Ann Cox. As I said before, she was a tremendous pioneer in the area of the fishing industry, understanding perfectly how to balance that which is traditional with the technological advancements that we have around the world, and delivering for this country a service that I can only say speaks beyond the hydrosphere that she works in. I also want to pay homage because my eyes would not permit me to look without understanding and appreciating my former lecturer who is sitting in the chamber, none other than Dr. Marian Hines, who insisted that I must be able to do something so that, unlike the Honourable Member for St. James Central, who spoke of those blue tablets, that I, at some point in time, didn't make my lecture blue vets with me. So I want to thank her. Even if she was blue vets, I know she'd be happy today for me to pay homage to her for the tremendous work that she has been doing and continues to do on behalf of the people of Barbados as it relates to ensuring that we have a drug service that is fit for purpose. But in order to get a drug service that is fit for purpose, we must recognize that we had a service operating under legislation that was really archaic. And there is never, in the words of my mother, who had some axioms that only old persons can understand and appreciate, that there is never the wrong time to do the right thing. And today, when we are able to repeal the Therapeutic Substance Act, revoke the Health Services Control Drugs Regulations, and revoke the Therapeutic Substance Act 1950, along with ensuring that that which is the Pharmacy Act now aligns itself perfectly with this new legislation, I am saying that the stars now have aligned themselves in a special way so that our country can now say that we have legislation fit for purpose. And when I say fit for purpose, I want us to appreciate and understand what we are being faced with as a small island developing state, a very small country. You've heard about the existential threats, the threats of climate change, the threats of biodiversity loss, and pollution being a partner in the triple planetary crisis. I just want to add the fourth horseman of the apocalypse, and that is, my friends, antimicrobial resistance. Antimicrobial resistance. And if we don't take a very serious look, not only legislatively, but in the way how we are able to inspire our people to be stretched and scratched with a new experience, a scientific experience to look beyond their current visual acuity, to look beyond that which is in front of them in terms of the new world, the pharmacological industry. If we don't give them that opportunity and experience, Mr. Speaker, then this existential threat that we are going to be exposed to will destroy not only Barbados, but the world as we know it. And this legislation gives us the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, sir, to be able to position ourselves to say we are not only going to show up as it relates to this fight, we are not going to stand up, Mr. Speaker, but we are going to speak up, because we have not only the voice, but we have the brains in this country. I believe, Mr. Speaker, we have the brains, and this legislation would allow. The Honourable Member for St. James South spoke about it. A young person, in the same way that we discovered, I won't call the area or the gully, but the world's smallest snake after 136 odd years or so. I believe with the right interest, the right zeal and zest and technology and the advancements that we have given and the opportunities for our people, that we can find that phytopharmaceutical, that active principle to be able to not only fight cancers and all these other drugs that we are talking about, chronic non-communicable illnesses, but of course, Mr. Speaker, the antimicrobial resistance that has threatened to destroy this world. And what do I mean by that, Mr. Speaker? And we are party to the conversation because of our behavior, our practices and our behavior. How did we get to this antimicrobial resistance that we are now trying to treat to? How did we get here? We get here because over the years, we have had some bad practices. And I ain't talking about the Member of Parliament for St. James Central, who, and I must admit to him because he is lettered in law and I may be lettered in pharmacology. But but those things that he spoke of that would allow persons to have the happy hours of the night, I want to admit to him and submit that they not only come in blue, they come in yellow, they come in white. There are a multiplicity of colors, because that is the advancement in technology, and that is the new world that we live in. But equally, we need to be able to give those young people who are scientifically driven, who has the spirit, and who certainly have the energy and the inspiration to be able to enter a pharmaceutical industry where there will be the providers of that fight against antimicrobial resistance. And when I said this, Mr. Speaker, I am making special reference to the fact, as I said, in the same way that we discovered the world's smallest snake, I believe somewhere in our gullies and in our ecosystems that there is an active ingredient that can be used to fight the vagaries of these illnesses. And I am saying, Mr. Speaker, it's not only in our biosphere. I spoke about Dr. Shelley Ann Cox earlier, but she have had many conversations with me about the usage of the marine environment, that which is considered the hydrosphere, and the importance of being able to utilize it and able to extract every single thing, including new and emerging antimicrobials. Over the years, and you have heard only recently, that we have had some quite advancements in terms of isolating the streptomyces and microorganisms to be able to produce those antibiotics, those new emerging antibiotics. Over the years, I think that we have produced from the marine environment chloramphenicol, streptomycin. I think that clindamycin was also produced from the marine environment, and of late, neomycin. Different drugs being produced from that environment with different characteristics, so that we can now prevent or be able to not only prevent, but to be able to resist that which is threatening our country and our life as we know it, in terms of those new emerging bacteria that metamorphose in a special way and are able to create havoc in our lives. I am saying, Mr. Speaker, sir, that now is the time for us to invest in our young people. Now is the time for us to invest in the innovations. You heard about the Life Science Center using biological products to be able to advance new medicinal therapeutic agents to be able to fight off these new emerging diseases, these superviruses and superbacteria that are causing havoc in our lives. And how did we get there? We have gotten there because, Mr. Speaker, we have a tradition in Barbados that from the time you get a cough, somebody advises, go to the pharmacy and get some 500s. You may not get it from the pharmacy because those who operate in the same dimension as they used to will tell you no. But they might have a family member that had a prescription that was not fully complied with, and they got some medication at home and said, well, go and take 2 for the cold. And you know what happens, Mr. Speaker, sir? You have started that train of building up that tolerance to the drug, where the opportunist bacteria lies in your body anyhow, recognizes now that which you have exposed it to. And later on, the doctor, you come now and the doctor prescribes the same medicine, and no, it can't work because your body now has built up a tolerance or familiarity with the drug, leading to the antibiotic and antibacterial or antimicrobial resistance that I spoke of earlier. And how else do we inadvertently expose ourselves and our body to this medication? We do it, Mr. Speaker, because we have a very bad practice in terms of disposing of our pharmaceuticals, the extra pharmaceuticals that you're not using. The first thing you do is open your caravan and throw it in the gullies. illegally disposing of it. You know what happens when the rain falls. Tablets, medication, capsules dissolve. They go in our water supply. And who drinks the water supply, Mr. Speaker? Who drinks the water supply? Barbadians. And when and if it runoff goes into the sea, you can understand that our fish that we consume, Mr. Speaker, we're full of antibiotics. The plants. I remember it was like the 70s or 60s in Africa, you had a tetracycline resistance because the fields, when I had a flood and the fields were full of tetracycline that was disposed of. And when the dentist, like my good friend from Christchurch West, prescribed the tetracycline, no, it didn't work because you inadvertently expose persons to the drugs. So in order for Barbadians to now live the pharmacological dream of having these new products, exporting them, and living that big industry, and being able to get funds and what's not from it, you have to equally look at our practices and where how our practices are seeking to destroy that which can basically save our lives. Bad practices of disposal of medication, you are often told that when you have medication and it is expired, or you didn't take the full dosage for whatever reason, because when medication is given to you, you really and truly supposed to take the full dose of medication. We have a habit in Barbados, in the Honourable Member for St. Philip North. She's the first that would, because she operates in that sphere, to tell us that you give a person medication, supposed to be for 7 days, and 3 days they're feeling good. They start to jump up and down the place, and next the security man said, man, I don't bounce for this anymore. You feel like superhuman. But in the meantime, you have to recognize that you are superhuman, but there are super viruses being created. And why? Not only because you're exposing the antibiotics to those viruses and the debt to change form and change structure to combat that same antibiotic, but because of climate change. I just mentioned it earlier. As part of the triple planetary threat and crisis, because of the same climate change, we are now being exposed to zoonotic type illnesses, bacteria and viruses that change form and change structure because of extreme heats, different weather patterns, exposure to excessive amounts of dust, whatever, the environment now causing those things to mutate and metamorphose in such a way that we are creating super viruses. The verdict is still out on COVID as to whether it was a zoonotic illness or not. But you would have seen, Mr. Speaker, and every Barbadian, how it was in terms of us getting vaccines. Now, if there is an equal trust for us in this country to start encouraging our young people, the Member of Parliament for St. James South, she spoke today like if she was a dendrologist of sorts. Some may call it a xylologist. But she spoke in terms of using extracts from plants all over Barbados and how they could be used. I remember in my day as a young, impressionable boy in St. Andrew running around, that the older folk, including my mother, if she's listening, would use bush tea. And bush tea for them was a combination of different herbs that they were used over the years traditionally for colds and coughs. And you know something? Like the buddies ad, it tastes bad, but it worked then. I don't know if it worked because, trust me, there's a belief that medicine is psychosomatic. It has something to do with the mind, and it has a lot to do with the body. Because if you go and take medication, and some people will tell you, and I could be corrected by the Member of Parliament for St. Philip North, that if you believe it is not going to work, then the negative mechanisms of the body and what's not comes into play. That is what they believe, and some prostaglandins and what's not. The doctors and things will speak about those things more limpid than myself, but people believe that if you don't have a positive outlook that it's going to work, that it will indeed work. But in those olden days, the positive reinforcement was the granny and your mother that you had. Because if in 3 days you didn't get up the bed and start going back to school, you know what's going to happen. So that was positive reinforcement. But what I'm saying, imagine with that traditional knowledge, we are able to put the science behind it. We are able to put the industry behind it. And we are able to market these products as a small island developing state. We would not be only parading across the world that small little Barbados, 166 square miles, 432 kilometers or whatever, that we would not be able to parade that we only have the world's smallest snake, the tri-snake, but an active principle that can cure diseases that other countries try all over the world, from cancer back down to cure, can't get it done. That's what we'll be able to say with the right technology, and that is what this bill allows. The medical products bill, which hopefully in the next couple of minutes will become the act, because we understand the importance of it in this the lived reality of the pharmacological industry that we are in. And what are we saying also? That this regulatory body will ensure, because that which exists in the Pharmacy Act in terms of administrative, the administrative constructs of the Act will remain. But we are taking out and dissecting that Pharmacy Act along with some others to ensure that we have tight regulations. And why is it important that we have tight regulations for this industry? It's important because we cannot afford to lose a life by playing Russian roulette with people and their medication. We can't afford it. And there's my years of experience, over 20-something years now. I've happened to be in pharmacies where persons come, they expect you to give them medication that they believe they see on the internet and all sorts of things, and they believe that this is the medication for them, and they will do everything. Tell a lot of lies, try to falsify prescriptions. I have had prescriptions that were written and were not written by doctors. I'm telling you, Mr. Speaker, just so that they can access certain products. That is why it's important that there's a regulatory body which says not only to pharmacists in the way how we're supposed to operate in terms of the drugs in diverse categories, but other non-pharmacies as well. And this is where the buck starts for me, because you would have heard over the years a trend in Barbados that is causing sleepless nights for a lot of us, especially as MPs, members of cabinet. I think it causes sleepless nights for the Prime Minister. The various drugs now and the new drugs being used by not only adults, but the new advanced drugs being used and combinations by our young people. The drug usage. And that's why I'm saying that regulations are important, and this bill is ripe for a purpose. Because here we have in this country a culture now creeping in where young persons, are taking medication over the counter. They go to a lot of non-pharmacies. They ain't getting advice from the pharmacists. But because they have this cell phone, they have internet, they're going and research different drugs, the different combinations, how to do this and how to do that. And because a lot of those products are not closely regulated because of the dosage regime, the amount that are found per tablet, the amount that is found in the liquid in the bottle, because those things would pass from regulatory bodies before there are what we consider over-the-counter medicines. You can go in other words, you can go any place. Once there's an outlet, commercial outlet, etc., you can go and take them off the shelves. Now, the danger in this, and that's why I'm happy that this new act when it passes this August chamber. That's why I'm happy it has that regulatory arm where there will be officers, inspectors of any place, which by definition has a pharmaceutical product. And that place could be any place in Barbados. And a pharmaceutical product, a drug, is described as something that can change and alter behaviors. So I'm saying that it has oversight for those places who sell, for instance, codeine and panadine, and codeine phosphate in liquid form, as we are called the codeine phosphate cough syrups, the tuscalide. I see it all over the place. And what those young persons are doing now is taking those things, mixing them with Sprite and what's not, Jolly Ranchers, and calling it lean. Well, they lean themselves into trouble. Because, and the reason why it's interesting, because there's a history as to why it's called lean. Because it was the 1980s or 70s or 80s where persons, when it came off the American culture, after using these things in a commodity dance hall, they will lean on the side, Mr. Speaker, sir. The ones in Barbados, young people leaning not only on the side, they're leaning upside down. Because after they're taking these products, they can't remember, Mr. Speaker, the activities that they're involved in. And I believe that this is one of the biggest fights that we must now, as a country, come together and unite and fight against the polydrug use by persons in Barbados, and unfortunately, the young people in this country. Because along with those, the lean and those things that can get over the counter, unfortunately, come across our borders, and this is why regulations are so important. That's why enforcement is so important. Coming across our borders, we are having drugs, ecstasy, methamphetamine. We call it the mollies. I can use the street terms in here. Mollies are being imported under the guise of vitamins. And that is where the pharmacovigilance must come into place. That is where the vigilance at the port must come into play. This is where the vigilance at the level of your legislation speaks to having the labs to test. This is where the vigilance comes into play. Because if you're saying that it is yohimbe or ginseng in capsule form, when it is tested randomly, the lab report must come to show that it is indeed yohimbe, ginseng, or any other vitamin, and not methamphetamine, as is the case sometimes. That is how drugs are moved across borders in the world, in the international sphere. We are a small and developing state. That's how it happens across the world, by coming in under the guise of other medication. And that's why the legislation speaks about pharmacovigilance, the ability to see those things. And that's why the inspectors, as you say in your legislation, must be able to go, remove any product, look at the label, make sure that the expiration date is within the confines of the label, make sure that the medication is being stored in an area and in conditions that makes the pharmacodynamics possible, ensure that it's being prescribed under the directions, the absolute directions of a pharmacist by law, or maybe an intern pharmacist or whoever, under the supervision of a pharmacist, and that what you get when the drug is prescribed is exactly what you're supposed to get in terms of the active ingredients. But the legislation goes a little further. It also speaks of the inert excipients, what makes up that tablet. So whatever cellular starch, whatever makes up that tablet, and it's written on the container, when the test is done, the test must reveal that these drugs are ever present or not. Because the legislation gets very serious. Persons could be subject to an offense under the Act. and the offense that can carry once you tamper with labels, once you mislead the public and give medication, the wrong information, wrong medication, and you do it willfully, you can be charged on summary conviction, which is the magistrate's court, as far as I know. I'm not a lawyer. Mr. Speaker, you'll correct me. On summary conviction of $50,000 or 5 years in prison. An adequate fine, because you are dealing with people's lives. You are dealing with life and death. And the Member of Parliament of St. James South spoke about all these things that you can take. She spoke about the guy, youngster from St. Leonard's Boys School, who understands that there's a maxim called fear God, think clean, and aim high. And you spoke about that youngster coming up with this formulation using soursop leaves. When I was a youngster, my mother used to break the soursop leaves and find the house to get rid of mosquitoes, so I can understand the sense of it. His grandmother probably told him that. And we need to give him the wherewithal so he can develop that product. Because you are correct, it's a good product. But along with that, we need to ensure that we are able to isolate those natural things, do all our testing, including clinical testing, like any other country in the world, so that we can have a product that we can export anywhere. That's what we are saying. We must be able in Barbados to derive from that which is natural products that we can export and save the world. Barbados must be the saving grace for the rest of the world. And we have done breakthrough things. Look at our songbird, Rihanna. We're now having a scientist that's only having a breakthrough moment with the streptomyces from the sargassum. We are doing great things in this country. You hear about Carlton Cummings with the battery, recycling batteries, when people were making a laughing sport and couldn't understand the seriousness. Now there is a mad grab for abatement technology. We have seen it all. So all I'm saying is that here is the opportune time for us. The time is right. Never a wrong time to do the right thing. This is the right time now, Mr. Speaker, to do the right thing in terms of putting mechanisms in place to advance an industry that will basically save this country. That is what we are saying. And not only save the country, but if we look a little further beyond our horizon, save the world. You've heard the Prime Minister in her own voice expose the fact that we must create world champions and world leaders. I believe right here in Barbados, there is a world leader in the pharmaceutical industry. And there was a young lady who was able to grace the Elara Court only recently, who worked on the same streptomyces. These are the things that will make a difference to our lives. Because if we do not do it and give our young people that inspiration, then we cannot make the advancements that we need to make. But we are not only talking about pharmacological products. We are not only talking about natural and semi-synthetic and synthetic preparations. We are also talking about devices. I came only prior to February from a ministry which spoke about the green economy and the fact that we should be using that which is natural to us to be involved in all sorts of manufacturing, even medical products. I know, for instance, in certain countries, they use the coconut husk to be able to build out the prosthetic industry. Some persons use even the trays in the hospital and made from green organic products. A lot of things in industries. Some hearing aids, you use certain bandages from the sheep cecum, using our black belly sheep because it goes into agriculture. There are a lot of opportunities, Mr. Speaker, and I see, without you saying anything, Mr. Speaker, that you have indicated to me that I have passed my expiry date. But I want to say that even sometimes after you pass that expiration date in terms of pharmacodynamics and kinetics and the pharmacology of a drug, that it may still have some usages, irrespective if it is blue, yellow, black, or brown. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that this bill is the perfect medication right now to treat the concerns of an industry which ultimately will have now to save not this generation, but generations to come. I'm obliged.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You do not have to give me any looks. I will be brief. I know the hour of the day, and I believe there are no more speakers to come, but I could not allow this debate to come to a close, perhaps without lending of my voice to support what I consider to be a very transformational piece of legislation. While I support what is being proposed in terms of the regulation of the pharmaceutical sector, the fact that we are clearly seeking to bring a level of research and a level of industry to what I think many Barbadians may perhaps not even be familiar with. We all take medication from time to time, but at the end of the day, I think what this government is seeking to do goes way broader than simply the passing of prescriptions over a counter or the administration of medication when you fall ill. This journey started about 4 years ago, Mr. Speaker. It started as a result, I believe, or perhaps the beginning of a journey. I'm sure there was a vision before in terms of being able to ensure that we could develop a sector for us, that we could mold a sector for ordinary Barbadians, that we could meet the needs of Barbadians where we find them. And COVID perhaps presented many opportunities for our country, for our people to be able to think outside the box. I consider this one of the legacies as a result of the COVID period, where certainly inspired by what was happening on the global stage, where we were fighting to be able to get basic vaccines, that certainly then Minister of Health, certainly Prime Minister and the rest of the team would have recognized that given that we were in a scramble to be able to save our people, and for those of us who were on the front line, we were well aware of what that scramble looked like, both from the government team but also from the medical profession trying to keep the country afloat. So at that time, obviously, it was a case of getting the vaccines to this country, making sure that from the youngest child to the oldest person that we were able to stabilize our country, to make sure that we were able to access what the other international countries had access to, and to be able to make sure that we had drugs that were safe in terms of vaccines that would basically help to protect our people. And we demonstrated, I think, a level of leadership during that period that certainly then led to obviously further discussions in terms of building out the life sciences sector, ensuring that we had a pharmaceutical sector now that saw itself as not just simply being the dispensers of medication, but also certainly looking at how we actually create a manufacturing sector and the development of the life sciences sector in its entirety. Mr. Speaker, I think that there is little doubt that there is support for what we are doing today. Certainly in the other place, there was support for it, some concerns expressed regarding other areas. And I think that as other members have spoken to, there are opportunities obviously for employment. There are potential opportunities for us to train our people. And perhaps the one that excites me the most is the area where we can take traditional Barbadian herbs and plants and be able to see what the potential opportunities are to be of benefit to our people. Now, I know there are some that are of the view that there are views on various plants and herbs that people use, and perhaps, yes, the time is coming for that level of regulation. But I want us to pause for a moment, Mr. Speaker, because there's another reality, and I wish to share that with this chamber, because there's a reality that many people also feel at times that they have to turn to alternate types of medication, sometimes natural remedies, because they feel very strongly that the existing, normal, traditional, over-the-counter medication is simply not working. Many people do so because they are desperate, because they feel that maybe sometimes the brand name drugs they don't have access to, sometimes they're not available in the pharmacies, sometimes they have to turn to the generic drugs, sometimes those generic drugs may not be available. And so in an effort to deal with the issues that plague our society, plague our people, many people turn to traditional natural medicine and people who profess in many cases to be experts in that particular field. We all grew up. I certainly was an asthmatic when I was young. I can't tell you how many papaya trees I was planted next to, how much tobacco tea I drank. My mother was the expert. She was the expert in her own right in being able to find whatever it was that could support what I was going through in terms of my asthma, because in many cases the Ventolin had some very significant impacts on me as a child. I would tremble and stuff. I would, it would take a while before I could actually retain the normal respiratory function. And she sought to find other mechanisms to be able to support what I was going through at that time. So I get that we are turning as a society to things that are natural. Certainly when I was going through breast cancer treatment, while I supported the fact that I had to go with a sector that perhaps knew better than I did in terms of what was out there in terms of care, I also use the soursop tea leaves, because I did my own research. I found that and I must say it for those who have said that sometimes the pharmaceutical industry does not cater for people looking like us. The reality is that that is very true. And in many cases, the doctors will say, well, I've heard about the soursop tea leaves. I've heard that there are some benefits from using them. But there isn't enough studies having been done to determine whether or not it has actually worked. Mr. Speaker, I can say that while I had good care, while I had, I believe, good medication, and while I had a good slew of doctors that looked after me, I believe that having used the soursop tea grown right in the backyard, that also helped me through a very difficult time. I am no doctor, so I am not here to give medical advice, but I'm simply saying that people turn to things naturally because we are a natural people. We understand the things that are around us. We understand the benefits of things that are around us. And many times we turn to those things in an effort to be able to seek solutions to the things that simply are not working over the counter. Now that brings me to a very important point, sir, because I was hoping to hear both the doctors in our midst and others collide with this very significant issue. While we are seeking to regulate the pharmaceutical industry and create new industry, there's an elephant in the room, sir. And that elephant in the room are the people that I see when I go to visit people at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital who are waiting for the dispensing of medication. The long lines, sir, the long waiting times, the long issues and the frustration that people are facing being able to get basic drugs. This is not about which drugs they're getting, but this is about the fact that while we have taken 4 years to get legislation to this place, Rome is burning, sir. There are people that I encounter when I go to the hospital to see people who have no choice but to be there. There are people who, when I go upstairs, they've taken a number, and when I come downstairs, the number has moved but 1 or 2. The fact that sometimes we don't have enough people behind the counter, or that people are there long hours waiting for the dispensation of drugs, especially our elderly who have not been able to encounter either the face behind the counter or to be able to have the accessibility to the drugs. So while I support, sir, what I think is a very noble exercise to be able to get us to this point and the potential of the future to be able to create opportunities for our country to ensure that these young people who sit in the public gallery from the Springer Memorial School, that they have the opportunity to dream big, to see themselves as scientists, to see themselves as being able to contribute to this sector in the long term. My concern, Mr. Speaker, today is also with the people that I encounter that have asked me, that have sent me here and have asked me to raise with our Honourable Minister of Health, since she is also in this place, and to raise on their behalf a very critical day-to-day issue that they encounter in being able to have medication dispensed quickly. Now, what is interesting, Mr. Speaker, is that during the COVID-19 period, we also learned a lesson. We learned about quick dispatch of pharmaceuticals across the counter. And we got them to people's homes quickly, expeditiously, without any challenges, because we needed to get things dispensed to people's homes. I am not sure if that facility is still working or if it is working as well as it was during COVID. But I do sincerely believe that there are some things that COVID taught us that don't need 4 years to come to fruition. Perhaps we need to go back to the drawing board to see whether those facilities that arose out of a crisis, whether some of those facilities can be extended, whether they can be improved upon, because the little old ladies that I encounter that say they've been waiting from even before 2 hours, sometimes before the pharmacy opens, and they see nobody at the window, or they see one person behind the counter, but that person ain't paying them no money, sir. I speak on behalf of them today that while we do this, that we also get back to the drawing board to make sure that we are able to alleviate some of the hardship that people who are sick are also facing when they go to our main institution for care, but also when they go to the hospital to be able to have medication dispensed. I won't get into the conversation about whether people should pay or they shouldn't pay. I believe that there is a value for what we as a government and successive governments have done in this country in terms of being able to make sure that our people can not only afford free education, but that they can get free school meals and that they can also get free health care. I think there is value in letting people know what the cost is to the country of so doing. But I will not engage in an exercise, Mr. Speaker, of insisting on people paying for things for which on many a day they do not feel that it is worthy of that payment. And I would want that our emphasis going forward is one where, while we look at the big picture things that create the opportunities for us to develop as a small island developing state, that we also place the same emphasis, the same robust initiative and the energy into making sure that the day-to-day things that affect the ordinary Barbadian in our healthcare system, that those things are equally front of mind and not simply the semantics that we so often like to share, not only in this place but in other places as well, sir. I also want to make the plea as well for those who are cancer patients, because as I speak about the brand name drugs, I am mindful that there was a time when we had a lot of relationships with the pharmaceutical companies, and we had certainly a far better relationship in being able to access those brand name drugs. Now, brand name simply means that it can be a little bit more expensive. It's going to mean that it is more effective. It also means that more research has gone into those particular drugs in terms of being able to have the accessibility to our people. And while I appreciate and understand that sometimes the generic drugs may often be as effective, I am concerned for the cancer patient. It was so ironic that I got the message this morning to say to me, because people out there clearly are listening to the debates, honourable member who would have introduced this bill, and they raised this issue, the cancer patients did, about a drug called Androcur, which has been removed apparently from the list of drugs that is accessible to our cancer patients. And many of them now have to rely on the cyproterone tablets in order to be able to have that as a replacement. I am told, again, I'm no doctor, but I am told that it is coming with some side effects. And I simply ask the question, while I appreciate that we have to find alternates, I want us to look at whether we are exploring with the same zeal and the zest that we do on other things, the fact that we need to make sure that we do get some of the brand name drugs to our people, and to make sure that where there are the side effects that we're getting from the generic drugs, that we perhaps have a conversation with our people to explain or to enlighten them as to whether the drugs are comparable, or whether we can do more to make sure that persons are being able to access what others are accessing across the rest of the world. Because we live in a time where people can get on the phone, they go on the internet, and they know what their friend in the United States and in the UK are taking, and they are told, but this particular drug is what isn't available to us here. But then when they check, they're being told that there is a different drug that they are having to take in Barbados. Mr. Speaker, I experienced it when I was going through my treatment. And therefore, when I speak from a place not only as a representative of the people, but I speak from experience. Because when I was trying to find a regimen that was comparable to the medication that I was to receive overseas, I was told quite simply here, I would have to take what is available on the market, and I was not going to have access to the drugs that were available overseas, quite simply. Now, I may have been fortunate, sir, and I give thanks to the Almighty Father every day for being able to have the opportunity to go there. But I never forget the people I have lost along the way that also had to settle for things that were, I wouldn't say inferior, but were not the same. And I believe I have a responsibility to be that voice to make sure that every Barbadian in our healthcare system has the opportunity to have access to the best quality medication and also the best quality care. I will continue, sir, to be able to advocate for that as long as the Almighty has given me life in my system. And I know we are trying, there's many moving parts, so it is not to say I don't know that we aren't spending millions of dollars to upgrade the system. I've heard those speeches before. But I speak from a place that there are ordinary people with simple questions about the type of drugs that are being administered and whether they are comparable to what others are taking or what is available on the market. And I think we need to move with the same aggression to ensure that those conversations are picked back up with the relevant companies to make sure that we have a diet available to our people that allows them the comfort to know that we have done all that we can to make sure that we save lives, sir. And sir, as I said, I think the other thing for me is the capacity of the authority, because what we are placing on this authority going forward is major. And I would hope that the Honourable Minister and her team have thought through very carefully the increased capacity that is going to be required in terms of persons to manage and to inspect and to make sure that all of these operations that now exist that other honourable members have spoken to, parading that they have medication that can cure all kinds of illnesses, that we have the necessary resources to ensure that that oversight in that agency is adequate for what lies ahead. Because the legislation speaks to being able to go into the premises, to be able to collect information, to be able to conduct samples. And I just hope that while we again introduce another piece of legislation with another layer of bureaucracy being extended, that we also have identified the positions that need to be filled if they are not now existing, or the positions that will now have to be strengthened, or the positions that have to be created. Because it cannot be that we've taken this long to do this, but at the same time we have other people out there parading as though they have the cure for things that they may not have the cure for, but our people have found a way to turn to them in order to seek the hope and the care that has become necessary for them. So, Mr. Speaker, I indicated to you I have not come here to take too long in terms of my contribution. I think that this area also, as a last point, offers an opportunity for us to explore the medicinal industry, and I didn't say medicinal cannabis, I said medicinal industry, the herbal industry. We have a number of places. I remember Peg Farm, Mr. Paul Bourne, before he passed, there was an area, and I believe it's still there, that was cultivated to be able to have all of the Barbadian plants that can offer medicines. I am hopeful that certainly now in my role as Minister of Environment, that we have the potential both within the botanical gardens and other spaces to be able to create those opportunities for people to understand the Barbadian plants, to understand the Barbadian herbs, not simply by being able to think that it is something that your grandparents told you about when you were young, a set of bush that you had to boil, but that you have a better understanding of how these herbs can actually help in many different ways to be able to help the human body as well. So I look forward to being able to work with the University of the West Indies and certainly education to be able to develop that project so that we have a template that we are not guessing about what we have as a country, but that for the first time we can actually now document what we have and to be able to share that with the rest of the world as well. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I am obliged, and I therefore beg to, Mr. Going closing off. I beg to move that you do now leave. Huh? Oh, sorry. She will do that, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm obliged.
Second thing. The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All of the members in favor?
No, I didn't wrap up. I finished, but she's supposed to do the... Yeah, Lisa's wrapping up. Lisa's wrapping up, yeah. I just...
The Honourable Minister will move that the bill be read a second time after she finishes her wrap-up. Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to begin by thanking all of the honourable members who have spoken on this important bill, and I will attempt to respond to as many of the queries that have been raised as I can. The Representative Minister Cattle raised about the issues of the protective regime and the kinds of products. I don't think there is a lot to respond to there, but there were a number of things that I do want to specifically make reference to. This particular body of legislation that is before this honourable chamber today and already passed through the other place does very much provide that effective regulatory regime that covers both traditional and non-traditional medicines. And while a number of honourable members raised concerns about the claims being presented on TV, just before the news, after the news, radio programs, all of the promotional material on Saturdays on the radio about products claiming to do certain things that they may not have the authority to do, this bill provides a regime where evidence, particularly science-based evidence, must be presented. Otherwise, those things can come under the ire of the legislation and its enforcement regime. So I give the honourable members that assurance. Of course, there are the issues that were raised, and we support that. I think we spoke about that in the opening of the bill, the opportunities for students, the new job opportunities for training, and so on. And of course, I did make mention in my opening about what other countries in the region are also doing. I mentioned Guyana. And Guyana was important because Guyana is currently doing a body of work that talks about our bodies, African bodies, Caribbean bodies, and what our bodies are doing distinct and different from what, say, for example, we heard from the Philippines and other jurisdictions. So that is some work that allows for us to be collaborative along with our other CARICOM member states. Now, we heard also about the issues of the pharmacy in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. This really would not have been the occasion for me to raise this, but this is something that is being seen not by any individual alone, but everyone. We've seen this, and it's one of the things that when I first assumed the role of Minister of Health a few months ago and was touring the hospital, I saw. And one of the things that we started to have an immediate discussion around was business process reengineering. Simply put, the lines at the hospital are driven at specifically in the area of the pharmacy. They're driven by the fact that the hospital maintains a dispensing regime for patients who are being discharged. When patients are being discharged from the hospital, they go home with their medication. So sometimes the medication goes up to the ward, sometimes their relatives may come down to the pharmacy and collect their medication. That's not where the issue comes in its entirety. It's where the issue starts. Where the issue continues is where those prescriptions, particularly for conditions that need to be managed over a period of time, have to be refilled. So when that prescription has to be refilled in 3 months or in 6 months, those persons now already discharged from the hospital in their homes and in their communities, they have to come back to the hospital, to the pharmacy to refill that medication. And having looked at that, we then came to the conclusion, but this don't make no sense because Ms. Brathwaite has to take the Pike Corner bus from St. Lucie, past Morris Bayer Polyclinic, past the Eunice Gibson Polyclinic in Warrens, past Brantford Tate, possibly in town, or past Black Rock and Brantford Tate in Black Rock, or even past Winston Scott and come back to Martindale's Road. That simply made no sense to us. And so we saw it too. It wasn't seen just one time. We saw it. And so the drug service is currently in extended discussions with the Queen Elizabeth Hospital because the Queen Elizabeth Hospital does not presently and has never dispensed through the public sector pharmacies. And so we're working with the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and the drug service to be able to facilitate persons being able to fill their prescriptions as dispensed from the Queen Elizabeth Hospital on their discharge at whichever polyclinic is closest and convenient to them. And that's work that is already underway. Now, on the question of different drugs that have been taken from the various lists, I believe that I have lost count of the number of persons who have raised concerns about different drugs that are no longer available to their constituents as well. And so we've had instances where cancer patients, on the one hand, one member in here, another member raised an instance for persons dealing with epilepsy and so on. And we sat down with the Barbados Drug Service trying to figure out what exactly was the issue. But that's exactly the reason why we're here, talking about this ecosystem that we're creating. The Barbados Pharmaceutical Inc. is meant to manufacture. The Barbados Medicinal Products Authority is meant to regulate. The Barbados Living Lab is meant to validate. The life sciences sector more broadly is meant to innovate and to regulate. And then the drug service is simply meant to deliver. But we started talking about supply side capacity constraints. We live in a world where we do not manufacture everything that we consume, and we spoke about the quantities. I believe one person spoke about the quantities that we actually have to order. There are some instances where the quantities that are being ordered for a country as small as Barbados are simply not available to us to order anymore. And they're taken from the drug formulary list because the manufacturers overseas have determined that the quantums are too small. And so simply put, what has happened is that the doctors have had to evolve to different options to control the medications, or in some instances, as in one case I investigated a few weeks ago, you started out with one medication 20 years ago. Innovation has evolved. More and more people, even though your body was tolerating that initial medication, more and more people are transitioning to a different medication now, and that is a legacy medication, no longer in production in large quantities, and it becomes difficult because the supply chain has been interrupted. So it's not a matter of Barbados not having, it really is just a matter actually, of Barbados not having control of the global supply chain. And that's why we're here today, to be able to make sure that Barbados is able to extend this ecosystem that we have been talking about that allows us to manufacture, to bring pharmaceutical manufacturers here in country to work with us to be able to make sure that we have for our people, whether it's Ms. Bradford from the Pike Corner bus, or Ms. Jones from Indy Pine, or Ms. Bradford that also lives in St. Lucie but is related to the lady from in Britons Hill. We are here for this ecosystem to support them. That's what this is about. And so I am very pleased to be able to have this legislation here today. I'm pleased to be able to have the legislation that allows us to regulate new pharmaceutical manufacturing capacity, and I give the assurance that the Ministry of Health's team, starting with our team, Dr. Mariam Hines, Lindsay Bowen, the current director of the Barbados Drug Service, and all others, get up every single day and come to work, and they put in the effort on behalf of our people. And every member of this Ministry of Health team that I have the privilege of leading is working on the back end of the Pharmaceutical Inc., working on the back end of the Barbados Medical Products Regulatory Authority. There are a number of staff members that are currently in the Barbados Drug Service that have been trained up, and I believe that in the other place, Senior Minister Walcott spoke about the persons who already went to Rwanda for the purpose of training. So the question of capacity and availability of skills has already been accounted for, and it simply is a matter of passing the legislation, establishing the authority, which I hope we can do after today's debate, and then being in a position to migrate those persons from the Barbados Drug Service and into the Barbados Medical Products Regulatory Authority so we can hit the ground running. And with these few words, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill is read a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and the Honourable Chamber dissolves itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, permission to call the bill in parts.
Permission so granted.
Part 1, clauses 1 to 5.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that Part 1, clauses 1 through 5 stand part.
The question is that Part 1, clauses 1 to 5 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that Part 2. I beg to move that Part 2, clauses 6 through 20 stand part.
The question is that Part 2, clauses 6 to 20 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 21 to 26.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 3, clauses 21 through 26 stand part at this time.
The question is that Part 3, clauses 21 to 26 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 4, clauses 27 to 30.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 4, clauses 27 through 30 stand part.
The question is that Part 4, clauses 27 to 30 stand apart. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 31 to 42.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 5, clauses 31 through 42 stand part.
The question is that Part 5, clauses 31 to 42 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 6, clauses 43 to 50.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 6, clauses 43 to 50 stand part at this time.
The question is that Part 6, clauses 43 to 50 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 7, clauses 51 to 54.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 7, clauses 51 to 54 stand part.
The question is that Part 7, clauses 51 to 54 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 8, clauses 55 and 56.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 8, clauses 55 and 56 stand part.
The question is that Part 8, clauses 55 to 56 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 9, clauses 57 to 59.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 9, clauses 57 to 59 stand part.
The question is that Part 9, clauses 57 to 59 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 10, clauses 60 and 61.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 10, clauses 60 and 61 stand part.
The question is that Part 10, clauses 60 and 61 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 11, clauses 62 to 66.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 11, clauses 62 to 66 stand part.
The question is that Part 11, Clauses 62 to 66 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 12, clauses 67 to 69.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 12, clauses 67 to 69 stand part.
The question is that Part 12, Clauses 67 to 69 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 13, clauses 70 to 73.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 13, clauses 70 through 73 stand part.
The question is that Part 13, Clauses 70 to 73 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 14, clauses 74 to 80.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that Part 14, clauses 74 to 80 stand part.
The question is that Part 14, Clauses 74 to 80 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
First schedule.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that the first schedule be the first schedule to the bill.
The question is that the first schedule be the first schedule to the bill. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Second schedule.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill.
The question is that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Third schedule.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that the third schedule be the third schedule to the bill.
The question is that the third schedule be the third schedule to the bill. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Barbados Medical Products Act 2026.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the adjournment of the House until Tuesday, the 23rd of June at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honourable chamber be adjourned until Tuesday, the 23rd of June, 2026 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 23rd day of June, 2026 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.